questioning everything that I thought that I knew. I need to get this out to see if anyone else has dealt with anything like this. I'll be keeping some details about where I live pretty vague on purpose because I don't want anyone coming around or anything. So, let's just say that it's a small town, the kind where folks mind their own business for the most part, and my house sits on a quiet lot with a rickety wooden fence that backs right up to a massive stretch of woods, miles of dense pines and rocky hills, creeks that wind through like veins, you name it. Like I said though, I don't want anyone tracking me down or poking around, so that's all I'm going to say about the place. Now, I've always loved hiking. It's my escape from my desk job, a way to unplug and feel like myself again. I'm not some sort of hardcore survivalist or anything, just a guy who likes a few days in the wild with a tent and a backpack sometimes. Last month too, I planned a 5-day solo hike right through those woods behind my place, a loop that I'd done a couple of times before. It's a bit of a rough trail, about 40 miles total I would say, not well traveled because it's steep and unmarked in spots, but I know it well enough to navigate with a map and a compass. So I packed light, a tent, sleeping bag, dehydrated food, a water filter and my old hunting knife just in case. And my dog, Rusty, a bit of a scrappy mutt, who usually comes with me, he had to stay home this time. He had done something to his leg chasing a squirrel at some point, so I left him with a neighbor. And so, day one was pretty normal. I started at dawn, the air crisp, birds calling, my boots crunching on pine needles, and I made some pretty good time, covering about 10 miles before setting up camp near a shallow stream. I cooked some instant rice, listened to the frogs, and I slept fine that night, the woods alive with their usual nighttime hum. Day two, though, is when things started to feel a little bit strange, I would say. I was maybe 15 miles in, following a faint path marked by stacked rocks, when the forest just suddenly went quiet. Not gradually, but all at once. No birds, no insects, no wind rustling the branches or anything. It was honestly like someone had just flipped a switch, and the silence was so thick that it made my ears ring a bit. I stopped, checked my surroundings, but nothing looked out of place. Just trees and underbrush stretching out forever. I told myself that it was just a weird moment, maybe animals sensing a predator nearby or something, but I don't know. I kept glancing over my shoulder because I felt it too. A few hours later, I stumbled across something that didn't belong though. A small pile of feathers, maybe from a crow or a hawk or something, but they were arranged in a tight circle on a flat boulder. They weren't scattered like a natural kill is what I'm getting at. They were placed, deliberate, the quills pointing inward like a pinwheel. I even took a picture, thinking that it was some hiker's quirky trail marker, but it definitely gave me a bit of a bad vibe. I moved on, setting up camp that night on a high outcrop with a clear view of the valley below. But as I ate my dinner that night, I kept hearing faint snaps in the distance, like twigs breaking. Not in a pattern like deer or bear, too. It was too measured, like someone pausing and stepping and pausing again. I swept my flashlight across the trees, but the beam caught nothing but branches. Sleep, it didn't come easy that night. I kept waking, feeling like something was just outside of the tent, though I never actually did hear anything. By day 3, the unease was now constant, though, like a weight on my chest. I found another oddity, too, around noon. A single footprint in the mud near a creek. But what was really weird was that they were about my size, and I could have sworn that they were my treads from my boots. But I hadn't crossed that stream yet, and it was fresh, the edges sharp, no other prints leading to or even from it. I checked my map, wondering if I'd somehow circled back here or something, or maybe another hiker was nearby, but the trail, as far as I could tell, was deserted. I hadn't seen a soul in days, and I'm pretty sure I hadn't circled back. The print was too perfect too, like it had almost been stamped there just for me to find it. Well, later that afternoon, a smell hit me, sharp, like spoiled meat left in the sun for too long, but it came and went in patches, no source that I could track down. I thought maybe an animal had died nearby, but I couldn't find any flies and I couldn't find a carcass anywhere, just that stench sort of lingering in certain spots. That night I camped in a small hollow, and around 3 a.m. I swear that I heard a sound, a low 3-note whistle, clear and human-like, but way too precise, almost like someone was practicing a tune. It came from the trees, maybe 50 yards off, and stopped as soon as I sat up. I gripped my knife, heart racing, telling myself that it was a bird or maybe a coyote, but honestly, it didn't sound like either one of them. That night, I stayed awake until dawn, the silence heavier than ever. Day 4, though, was worse. The trail suddenly felt wrong, like it had changed right under my feet. Familiar landmarks, a forked pine, a moss-covered rock, looked slightly off almost like they had been moved. My compass was now useless, the needle twitching lazily no matter how I held it. So I relied on my map, but even that seemed to betray me at points. Distances just didn't add up, and I kept looping back to spots that I swore that I'd passed hours earlier. The air felt thick still, like breathing through a cloth, and that rotting smell was now back, stronger than ever. Around mid-afternoon, I found another sign too. A small bundle of sticks tied with a strip of red cloth hanging from a branch like a crude ornament. It wasn't weathered too, like it had been placed recently, but I hadn't seen anyone who could have left it. I didn't touch it, just snapped a picture again, and I just kept moving, my pace quicker now, wanting to get out of here. That night I barely slept. I heard that whistle again, closer this time. It almost seemed like it was circling my camp, in fact. I didn't dare shine my light, and I just laid there clutching my knife, waiting for morning. And on the 5th day, I was done with this. I broke camp at first light, moving fast, desperate to get back to my car. The woods suddenly felt alive as well in a way that I couldn't explain. Like every tree was leaning in and watching. I reached the trailhead by noon, my legs absolutely burning, and I drove home. The relief of seeing my street almost overwhelming. My house is a small one, a bit of a fixer-upper with a sagging back porch and a fence that's half-rotted, but it's always felt safe to me. The woods are close, though, and just beyond the fence, the tree line looms dark and endless, but I got Rusty back from my neighbor, showered, fed him, and I just tried to put the whole hike thing behind me. I figured that the weirdness was probably just exhaustion, dehydration, or maybe just my mind playing tricks on me in the solitude. But then, about a week later, whatever this was, it seemed to follow me home. You see, it was a Wednesday night around 10:30 p.m. and I was in my living room sipping a beer, scrolling through emails on my laptop like I always did. Rusty was sprawled out on his bed by the couch, snoring softly. The house was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the faint patter of rain from a passing shower. But then came a knock. 4 slow, heavy thumps on the front door. I froze, beer halfway to my mouth. I mean, I don't really get visitors out here, especially not at night, and my closest neighbor's a pretty good walk away. So I set my beer down, thinking that maybe it was a delivery guy lost or maybe a kid pulling a prank. But it came again. 4 knocks. Louder this time. Like someone was testing the door's strength almost. But then, I swear to you that I heard my own voice, clear as day, almost as if it was recorded. "Hey, it's me, let me in," is what the voice said. Same pitch, same light rasp from years of smoking, but it was the same way that I clip my words too when I'm tired. Rusty instantly snapped awake, ears up, staring at the door with a low growl that turned into a bit of a whimper. But I didn't move. The voice came again, softer but more insistent. "Come on, I'm out here. Open the door." It was me, down to the way that I stressed certain syllables, but I mean, I was obviously here sitting on my couch. Rusty suddenly backed away, tail tucked, his eyes never leaving the door. I grabbed my phone to call someone, my brother, a friend, anyone, but the screen showed no signal, even though I always get service at home. The knocking stopped, but the silence was almost worse, heavy and wrong, like the air was holding its breath. I crept to the window by the door, keeping low, and peered through the crack in the blinds. The porch was empty, the single bulb above it casting a weak glow over the steps. Beyond the street was dark, and the woods loomed at the edge of my yard as always, their shadows blending into the night. Although I could have swore that I saw movement, a shape, tall, slipping between the trees, but it was gone before I could be sure, so I don't know about that one. Either way, I stayed up all night, lights on, Rusty pressed against me on the couch, and it must have been around 4 in the morning when I heard it again, that same 3-note whistle from the woods, faint but unmistakable, now coming seemingly from my backyard, right where the fence meets the tree line it seemed. I didn't look though. I kept every door locked, in fact, every window shut, and I just waited for daylight with Rusty. When morning came, I checked the porch, half expecting nothing, but it was like a scuff mark of mud by the steps. I don't know. It looked fresh and deep, like someone had been stood there for a bit, but it was hard to make out. Mind you, I hadn't been outside since the day before, and the rain had stopped hours earlier, so I'm pretty sure that it wasn't mine. I did my best to sort of dismiss it, and checked the backyard, but nothing was disturbed. No broken fence slats, no trampled grass, but still though, I was nervous, and I don't know if that's the reason why the air felt heavy, but it was like it had been on the trail again. I've been digging into local stories since then, trying to make sense of this. The town's got its share of old tales, like hunters hearing voices that sound like family, loggers seeing shapes that mimic people that they know. Some call it a skinwalker, others call it something in the woods. I did find a local blog post about a guy who heard his own voice calling from the forest at one point, but he didn't mention anything physical, like no footprints or signs or anything. The feathers, the lone print, the tied sticks, the whistle, it's all too tangible to write off as just my imagination. And so I've stopped hiking, at least for now. And honestly, I'm also thinking about moving now, somewhere far away from whatever this is. I've started leaving the porch light on too, checking the locks twice every night. But every night, I listen for that knock now, terrified that I'm going to hear my own voice again, begging to be let inside. I don't know what it was, but I'm almost certain that whatever it is, it followed me off of that trail after my hike those 5 days, and I really hope that it doesn't come back before I get the chance to move. I've always had a bit of a weird intuition about people. Growing up, I was surrounded by family members whose lives were full of danger, deception, and secrets. I learned early on how to recognize the subtle signals of someone predatory, the almost imperceptible way that they test your boundaries, the way that they smile a little too perfectly, The way that they seem charming on the surface, but make your gut scream otherwise. So when my daughter was invited to playdates with the child of a parent that I barely knew, alarm bells immediately went off. You see, my mum had a friend named Gregory, a long-haul trucker who she said had been great with kids. The girls met through a local community organization, ostensibly a wholesome group for parents and children. But as I dug deeper, I realized the group's teachings were twisted, with extreme ideologies that made my skin crawl. I couldn't control my mum entirely, but I insisted that I accompany my daughter to these playdates, and made it clear that Gregory was not allowed near her without me present. When I first met Gregory, he was disarmingly charming, almost painfully so in fact. He smiled constantly, his laughter a little too rehearsed, and his tone was soft, designed to lower your guard. He immediately began emphasizing how protective he was, not about his own child, but about me, as if I were fragile and needed his constant supervision. He mentioned odd rules about his own daughter, like she wasn't allowed to wear pants, only dresses, and that she must adhere to strict routines that seemed, well, oppressive. The first play date was at a local beach, too. Gregory insisted that I sit closer to him on a blanket that he had set up. "You can see the kids better from here," he said. I moved just to avoid awkward tension, but his gaze lingered far too long. He was silent for what felt like an eternity, almost studying me, and it left an unease in my stomach. I tried to focus on the kids, pretending that his presence wasn't disconcerting, but even then the hairs on my arms were standing up for sure. I could feel his attention like a physical weight pressing down on me. Well, over the next few weeks, the behavior escalated. During another play date at a children's art studio, he repeatedly offered me drinks, beer to be exact, while surrounded by children painting and laughing. At first, I just sort of laughed it off, but it became clear that he was testing boundaries, seeing how far that he could push without me objecting. When we moved to a trampoline park afterward, it became truly terrifying. He started physically interacting with me in ways that I repeatedly told him to stop. He lifted me and threw me into the foam ball pit despite my protests. He grabbed my wrist, already scraped from sliding on the trampoline, and pressed hard, watching me wince, almost gleefully. Every instinct in me screamed danger at this point. I couldn't sleep for days afterward, too, my mind just racing. I reached out to my siblings, recounting the events, but even sharing it made me drink down my tears. My heart, it raced uncontrollably, and I felt trapped in a psychological fog almost. What scared me the most wasn't just his hands-on aggression, it was the combination of charm, manipulation, and unpredictability. His occupation as a trucker, too, meant that he was used to moving unseen and having control over situations. His behavior, it was deliberate. I could feel it. He was testing how far that he could push me, how much I would tolerate before reacting. After the second play date, that was when I cut all contact, forbade him from seeing my daughter, and implemented new safeguards. I rearranged my work schedule to always be present with my daughter, ensured all doors and gates at my home were secure, and monitored interaction with my mum closely. I never received cooperation from her regarding his address or his details, and I didn't pursue formal complaints. I simply wanted my daughter safe and my family shielded from this person. Even though it's been a year now, the memory still sits uncomfortably. I can still feel the weight of his gaze, the way that he positioned himself, the unsettling way that he smiled when boundaries were crossed. My instincts were screaming at me, and I know now that I would never ignore them again. Some people just carry danger in their presence, I guess, and it's not always visible at first glance. This man was one of them, manipulative, predatory, and completely unaware that I could see through his whole facade. The lesson, it's burned into me. Trust your gut and protect those who cannot protect themselves. Some people are not just socially awkward or misguided. They're dangerous, and their danger is hidden behind charm, politeness, and a perfectly rehearsed smile. This happened when I was about 18, back in the late 2000s. At the time, I had a weekend job at a small independent bookstore in my hometown. It wasn't a big chain, just one of those cozy places with crooked wooden shelves and the smell of old paper everywhere. My cousin also worked there part-time, and most of the regulars knew us by name, so the place always felt pretty safe. One afternoon, when the store was almost empty, a man in his late 20s or maybe early 30s wandered in. He didn't browse, didn't ask about books. Instead, he walked straight up to me at the counter, slid a folded piece of paper across the desk, and left without saying a word. Inside was a phone number and nothing else. I laughed it off at first. Strange, yes, but I'd had weirder interactions, I suppose. Anyway, a few days later, I was sweeping the sidewalk outside when an old green station wagon pulled up. Dangling from the rearview mirror was a small stuffed rabbit, dirtied and frayed. The driver leaned out, same man, and started asking me personal questions. I cut him off quickly, blurting out that I'm still in school and I'm not interested. Usually that worked, but this time it didn't. That night, near closing, one of my co-workers nudged me and whispered, "Hey, don't look now, but someone's been standing near the travel section for almost an hour now." And sure enough, when I glanced up, it was the same man, silent, staring, and pretending to flip through the books that he clearly wasn't reading. My manager, an older woman who took no nonsense, kept the office door open after that so that she could watch him. He eventually drifted outside, but sort of lingered across the street until long after dark. A couple of nights later, though, my aunt, who I hardly ever spoke to, sent me a strange email with the subject line, "Is this about you?" And attached was a screenshot from a local classified site. The post read, "Saw you shelving books at the shop downtown. You wore a plaid skirt, black boots, and a necklace with a red stone. You're beautiful. Would love to meet you. Signed a man in his 30s. The part that made my stomach drop, though, was the necklace detail. You see, I'd borrowed that necklace from my cousin only once, on the exact day that that man had been hanging around. I showed my manager, and she responded to the post herself. "Back off, this is a teenager you're talking about." But from then on, things only escalated. I'd see the green station wagon idling outside while I worked. Once I spotted it parked near my bus stop, but when I doubled back toward the store, the man was somehow already walking behind me on the sidewalk, too close and way too quickly. I panicked, ran inside, and he vanished before anyone else could see him. Eventually, the police got involved after I filed a report too. For about a week, an officer would swing by the store at closing to make sure that I wasn't being followed. And then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, the man just stopped showing up. The car disappeared, the postings vanished. I ended up transferring to another job the next year, but even now, whenever I see a green station wagon or an old stuffed rabbit, my stomach always knots up. I was 24 when this happened, and and even now I feel a chill thinking about just how close I came to something far worse. So my roommate Kara was using a dating app and matched with a guy that she thought was perfect. He told her his best friend was also single, and before I knew it, she'd arranged a double hangout. I wasn't thrilled, but Kara begged me to come along with her. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Instead of grabbing coffee or going to a movie like normal people do, their idea of a first outing was to go hiking on a rugged trail just outside of the city. I thought that it was a really odd choice, but Kara seemed excited, so I kept my doubts to myself. They picked us up in an old SUV that rattled every time it hit a bump. Kara sat up front with her date, who was loud and animated, while I sat in the back with his friend, the guy that I was apparently paired with. He barely spoke the entire drive, just sort of sat there staring out of the window, his reflection flickering in the glass. When our eyes accidentally met in the rearview mirror, he didn't smile either. Well, the trail was steep and rocky, weaving up through dry hills, and from certain points you could see the neighborhoods far below, their lights flickering faintly against the darkening sky. The whole place felt strangely isolated, I guess, even though I knew the city wasn't that far away. But we started climbing, and before long, Kara and her date moved quickly ahead of us, laughing and sort of teasing each other. Within minutes, they rounded a bend and disappeared from view. That was when I felt his hand sort of clamp down on my shoulder. At first, I thought that maybe he'd tripped and grabbed me for balance. But then, something cold and sharp pressed against the side of my cheek. Instantly, I knew what it was. It was a knife. My stomach dropped, and I froze in place. I wanted to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. I must have let out a nervous sound, though, half sort of laugh and half gasp, because he leaned in close and whispered, almost like he was sharing a secret, "Most people panic. You didn't. That makes you interesting." Then, just like that, he snapped the blade shut, slipped it back into his pocket, and stepped away as if nothing had even happened. I walked faster, desperate to catch up to Kara, but he stayed close behind me the whole time. By the time that we reached them again, he had his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable, like nothing had happened at all. After the hike, they suggested that we stop by his friend's family house. I expected a modest place, but instead we pulled up to a gated property with manicured lawns and a house so massive that it felt surreal. Kara was dazzled, but I couldn't shake the sense that I was somewhere that I absolutely should not be. Inside, the guys offered us drinks. I declined, gripping my water bottle like it was a shield. I just wanted the night to end, and eventually Kara was ready to leave, and I practically sprinted to the car. It wasn't until later that I realized that I'd actually left my jacket behind, draped over one of their chairs. A few hours after we got home, Kara received a message from her date. It was a photo of my jacket, held by the man who had pulled the knife on me. The caption read, "She'll have to come back if she wants it." I didn't. I instantly blocked the number, deleted the app, and I never saw him again, thankfully. This happened when I was about 16, the summer before my last year of high school. My schedule was lighter toward the end of term, so most afternoons I'd get home before anyone else. Usually I loved having the house to myself too. It meant music cranked up, endless snacks, and gaming without interruptions. One Monday though, I came home to something strange. The small side gate that led into our backyard was standing wide open. And look, that might sound trivial to most people, but in our family, we were obsessive about locking things. My dad double-checked every latch every day, and my mum carried spare padlocks in her handbag just in case. I can assure you that that gate was never open. I brushed it off. I mean, maybe the wind caught it or something, and let myself inside. And as I pushed the front door, I then realized that the deadbolt wasn't set. The door was actually unlocked. At that, my chest tightened. I tried to convince myself that someone had just forgotten, but it definitely gnawed at me that it was unlocked in the first place. Inside, I noticed something else too. The spare set of house keys, which normally hung on a hook in the laundry, they had been moved to the counter near the sink. No one ever moved them, and that little detail put me on edge more than even the open gate did. I tried to distract myself, I guess, but the house just felt wrong. Like, I don't know, I was being monitored or something. The sound of the fridge humming seemed too loud, the creaks in the ceiling too deliberate. Every little noise made my skin prickle. The following day, I didn't go home at all, in fact, because my older sister had a minor medical procedure and we stayed overnight near the hospital that night. It was a relief to avoid the house, to be honest. And when I finally returned 2 evenings later, I was alone again. And the instant that I stepped onto that porch, dread just slammed straight into me. The porch light was now on, even though my mother always turned it off before leaving for work. The front door was locked this time, but the key turned too smoothly, almost as if it had only just been locked or something. Inside, the air felt heavy too, and I walked through each room trying to calm down, but it was when I got to the kitchen that I froze. The large butcher's knife that we usually kept in a wooden block on the counter was missing. I assumed that my mother had put it into the dishwasher, but when I asked her later, she swore that she hadn't touched it, and for days afterward, she couldn't find it anywhere either. That week, the tension got worse too. Every afternoon I came home before my parents, I'd grab the smallest paring knife and keep it nearby while I sat upstairs. I hated that I was doing it, but I just couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. And then there was the smell, a weird faint odor that would hit me as soon as I entered, like old leather mixed with something metallic. I couldn't trace where it was coming from, and it wasn't the garbage, it wasn't shoes, it wasn't the vents, it was sort of just, I don't know, in the air, I guess. The doors didn't help either, but my mother swore that she locked everything every morning, and yet almost every day I'd find either the back sliding door or the laundry door unlocked when I got home. Once, too, the laundry window was slid open just a few inches. She insisted that she hadn't touched it, but I don't know. When the holidays finally started, we went away for a week at the coast as well. And for the first time in probably months, I finally felt free of the anxiety. I slept soundly, swam in the ocean, and quite honestly, I forgot about the house entirely. But when we got back, reality hit again. Our neighbor walked over the second day that we were home, and they told my parents that they'd spotted a tall man wandering around our backyard during the evenings while we were gone. They assumed it was a relative checking the place, but of course it wasn't. That night, as my dad was locking up, he finally found our missing butcher's knife, and it was outside, lying on the wooden bench by the shed of all places. No one ever admitted to moving it, too. For weeks afterward, I heard footsteps crunching in the garden gravel at night. The smell of leather would waft through the downstairs hallway, and every single time that I came home alone, I felt that same sort of cold prickle of unease. And then, one day, almost suddenly I would say, it all just stopped. The footsteps, the smell, the unlocked doors, everything just sort of ended. I still don't know if it was some stranger squatting in our house, sneaking in when we were away, or if it was just some mind connecting dots that weren't really there, but whenever I walk past that shed, I always remember that knife, and I wonder just how close I came to meeting whoever left it there. 2 summers ago, I was working at a local summer arts program teaching ceramics to teenagers. One of the other instructors, a man named Julian, struck up a casual friendship with me. He was older, maybe in his mid-30s, soft-spoken but intense, I would say, and always seemed to know a little bit too much about people. At first, I genuinely thought that he was just eccentric. One evening after a gallery visit, though, with a few co-workers, he invited me to visit a cabin that he had rented in the mountains. He said that it was a perfect spot to disconnect and be inspired by nature. Normally, I would have declined. I mean, I barely knew him. But something about the way that he framed it made me hesitate to say no. The drive was long, winding along foggy roads through dense woods. Almost immediately, too, I regretted doing this. He asked me odd questions the whole way there, like, have you ever truly been alone and afraid, or do you believe someone can watch you without being seen? I laughed nervously, trying to dismiss it as him being theatrical or something. Well, when we finally arrived at the cabin, it was darker than I expected. The porch light flickered weakly, and the structure looked like it hadn't been used in years. Peeling paint, broken shutters, overgrown vines crawling up the side. The door creaked as he opened it, revealing a living room cluttered with dusty furniture, stacks of old newspapers, and no signs of modern amenities like food or clean bedding anywhere. He led me to a bedroom and casually said that he was going to unpack, leaving the door ajar. I turned on the light and my stomach sank instantly. The bed had thick leather straps attached at the corners. There were also heavy chains coiled on a chair nearby. I backed out of the room slowly, heart hammering. I spent the night sitting in the corner, clutching a flashlight that I'd found in the kitchen. I told myself to stay calm, but every shadow on the wall seemed to stretch toward me. Every creak in the floorboards felt deliberate. I didn't sleep at all that night, listening to the wind whip through the broken shutters, imagining what he might do if I tried to leave. Well, the next morning he left to run some errands. That's what he told me anyway, saying that he'd be back by midday. So I cautiously explored the cabin in daylight, and it was worse than I expected. The refrigerator was completely empty. The stove was rusted shut, and the only running water was a slow trickle from a cracked pipe that I could find. On the porch, I noticed something even more unnerving too. Dozens of small, withered plants in pots, arranged in like a rough circle. All but one were brown and shriveled, but the center one, perfectly alive and seemingly well taken care of, seemed almost unnatural. Not in the paranormal sense, but like someone had been taking care of only that plant for some reason. Well, I gathered my belongings quietly and I left while he was gone. But as I was leaving, I noticed a set of muddy footprints leading from the cabin into the woods, and sort of circling back as though someone had been watching from the tree line. I was literally trembling the whole walk back to the main road. Later that evening, after I caught a lift, I sent him a message explaining that I couldn't continue visiting. He didn't respond, at least not directly. A single emoji appeared, a thumbs up. I felt the chill of his presence long after that message. And even now, months later, I cannot stop thinking about those straps, the chains, the single thriving plant in the dead circle. and the footprints that suggested that I wasn't truly alone in that cabin when I thought that I was. I don't know if I narrowly avoided a predator or if I just stumbled into someone's strange obsession or what. All I do know is that I will never be going back there, and will be avoiding this person from now on like the plague. When I was 14, I went to the community recreation center with my younger sisters for a swim one day. I'd always been a bit taller and broader than most of the girls my age, so people often assumed that I was a bit older, a fact that would soon become very unnerving. So after a couple of hours of splashing around in the pool, I started feeling a bit queasy. My younger sister noticed too and suggested that I take a break in the locker room. "You don't look so good," she said. "Maybe you should sit down for a bit." I nodded and walked to the changing area, relieved to have some peace finally. The locker room was empty, perfect for a moment to rest. So I sat on the bench, closed my eyes, and tried to relax. A few minutes later, though, I heard footsteps echo on the tile floor. A man had entered. He was tall, athletic, well-built, the kind of person that you notice instantly. I assumed that he was waiting for someone, maybe checking on a friend or a family member. But then he approached me, and to my horror, sat on the bench right beside me. His presence was overwhelming. Our thighs even brushed against each other. Instantly, I scooted away, giving him a look that clearly said, "What are you doing?" He sort of smiled, unnervingly calm, and said, "Don't worry, I won't hurt you," while casually resting his hand on my back. I froze, heart racing, unsure whether to run or what to do. I slowly stood up, backing away. Then he asked in a tone that made my stomach turn, "How old are you, kid?" 14, I said, my voice trembling. He shrugged, almost nonchalant. "Cool," he said. Then, as if trying to reassure himself, he told me that he was 23. I backed further toward the exit, my mind racing. The man began to stand, moving toward me with deliberate steps. That was when the panic truly set in. I tried to stay calm, looking for a way out. And at that exact moment, a bathroom stall door creaked open. A woman, probably in her mid-30s I would say, stepped out, and she noticed the situation instantly. I remember the relief flooding through me as she walked closer, maintaining a protective distance between me and the man. The stranger paused, his confident posture faltering as her presence became undeniable. He muttered something under his breath and then literally bolted toward the exit. The woman, whose name I later learned was Jessica, she stayed with me, checking if I was okay. She didn't rush me or speak harshly. She simply offered calm reassurance, really, sitting nearby until I felt steady again. She even waited with me while I changed out of my wet clothes, making sure that I was safe until my sisters finished and returned. Quite honestly, I don't know what would have happened if Jessica hadn't have been there. Her timely entrance and calm authority probably prevented a terrifying and truly terrible encounter from turning way worse. I've never forgotten her kindness. In fact, almost every time that I visit a public facility, I still think back on that day and I silently thank her for stepping in. Now, years later, I still remember that day vividly. What could have been a traumatic memory turned into a reminder of human vigilance and courage. A few years ago, my closest friend, Nina, had a small but growing presence online. She wasn't a full-time influencer yet by any means, but she had gotten enough free products and occasional perks to make it fun. One day, she got a direct message from a boutique hotel in a major tourist city on the East Coast too, offering an all-expenses-paid weekend stay in exchange for photos and a few social media posts. They said that she could bring a female friend along if she wanted to. Nina had never done anything like this before though, so she was a little bit hesitant at first. So she invited me, her longtime friend and confidant, to come along for support. Worst case scenario, she said, we just cover my ticket herself if the hotel refused. The email included a contract, which looked legitimate at first glance. It required us to pay for our flights up front and promised reimbursement upon arrival. We thought that it was probably just standard practice to avoid no-shows. Well, the trip began pretty normally, really. At the airport, a man held a small sign with Nina's name and the logo of the hotel account. He guided us to a black SUV waiting outside. And that is when things started to go wrong. As we were about to get in, the driver, a tall man with dark sunglasses and a thick accent, started yelling at Nina. He insisted that she could only bring a different girl, not me. His voice was angry and insistent. We were completely stunned. Another man who had walked up from the terminal seemed frustrated too and started arguing with the driver in rapid sort of foreign speech. They demanded to know where this other girl was. Nina tried to explain that I was just her friend, that we were both fully on the trip plan, and that there was no other girl. The driver ignored her, and the man in the passenger seat suddenly jumped out, threw our luggage onto the pavement, muttered something underneath his breath, and the SUV suddenly sped off. We were speechless and utterly frozen, hearts pounding because we had no idea what to do. Nina immediately emailed the PR contact listed in the messages, a Rebecca, explaining the situation, but she never got a reply. We decided to take a cab to the hotel ourselves in the end. And when we arrived, we noticed right away that something was definitely off. The building looked completely different than the photos. The name on the sign had changed and the staff didn't recognize our reservations at all. The Instagram account that we had been in contact with, well, it had belonged to the old hotel, completely rebranded now, with new owners and no staff connection. And it was then that we realized what had just almost happened. Whoever had contacted Nina through the old account was using it to lure someone into a situation that we didn't consent to. The posts were old, photos outdated, and the account had a respectable number of followers, which made the scam feel legitimate, I guess. We called the local authorities, spoke with a detective, and tried to trace who had access to the account. In the end, though, it was just a dead end. And none of the former employees had any connection, and the person behind it remained completely unknown. Nina, she cried for hours after realizing just how close she had come to being taken, I guess. I can still remember the look of shock and relief on her face when we finally left that hotel as well. We never got a follow-up from anyone. The Instagram account was eventually deleted, and we never heard from the perpetrators ever again. The whole ordeal, though, left a mark on both of us for sure. It was a chilling reminder that even small social media perks can be exploited by people with sinister motives. We both vowed to verify every online offer after that, every direct message and every contact, before even considering a trip like that ever again. Now, whenever Nina gets a DM from a hotel or a brand, we always triple check everything. And we never underestimate just how quickly a seemingly innocent opportunity can turn into something truly frightening. A lesson learned, I guess. Always vet online offers, trust your instincts, and never go alone to a situation that feels off. This happened a few years back after a major national crisis. back when travel was tense and paranoia in small towns ran high. I was 25 at the time, driving alone across the southwest to get back to my child, who was staying with their other parent. I had been out of state caring for a sick relative and was exhausted from the long trip. It was past midnight in Arizona, and the highway was almost completely empty, a long stretch of desert road with only a few dimly lit rest areas. I was approaching an exit for a small motel that I had planned to stop at for the night when flashing lights appeared in my rearview mirror. I slowed and pulled over, annoyed but compliant. I hadn't been speeding, and aside from the occasional tumbleweed rolling across the road, there wasn't a soul in sight. The officer, or what I assumed was an officer at first, walked up to my driver's side window, which already felt pretty odd. Usually highway patrols approach from the passenger side for safety. Well, he stared at me silently for a long moment, then abruptly walked back to his vehicle, only to return almost immediately. "Step out of the car," he said. Alarm bells rang immediately in my head. I had been pulled over plenty of times for speeding tickets in the past, but this felt different. Hesitant but careful, I stepped onto the asphalt. The desert wind was sharp and the silence heavy. "Have you been drinking?" he asked, his voice tense. "No," I replied. "Why did you pull me over?" "You've been driving strangely," he said, waving vaguely at the road behind me. It was absurd. I had been driving perfectly straight the entire time. Then he leaned closer and asked in a chillingly serious tone, "Are you dangerous? Are you carrying anything that you shouldn't?" I was stunned. I was a young woman, unarmed and miles from any other vehicle. I had identification and a background that clearly suggested that I wasn't a threat, but still, my pulse raced. He then demanded that I perform a field sobriety test. I followed the instructions as best as I could, walking a straight line across the cracked asphalt, arms outstretched, heels to toes. I passed, but the relief was short-lived. "Time to check the car," he said, pointing toward the vehicle. My stomach sank. Again, I was alone in the middle of the desert with someone who had a firearm and was acting unpredictable. I weighed my options. I could assert my rights, but I was exhausted and the thought of confrontation honestly scared me. I told him that it was fine, letting him search the car, hoping that compliance would keep me safe. He opened a small, nondescript suitcase that I had packed for work. It contained costume pieces for performances that I did on the side. "What's all this?" he barked. It's for my performances," I said quietly. "I'm an entertainer." His demeanor shifted instantly. He began yelling at me, calling me degrading names, mocking my lifestyle. I froze, realizing just how alone I actually was. Occasionally a car passed by on the highway, but most of the time it was just me and him in the desert, with only the wind and the hum of distant highway lights. Then he stepped back and gestured toward the tree line on the side of the road. "Walk over there," he commanded. I stopped cold. "No, I want backup. I want another officer here, and a female one," I said firmly. He blinked, clearly caught off guard by my insistence. I frantically waved at the next car that passed, signaling for help, heart hammering in my chest. After what felt like an eternity, he muttered something, scribbled a piece of paper, apparently a ticket, and motioned for me to get back into my car. He left without any further confrontation. I never did pay that ticket, and to this day I have never heard anything else from it. Looking back, even decades later, I now understand what this was. Something about the way that he moved, the insistence, and the lack of standard procedure made me wonder at first if he was truly a legitimate officer. The memory of standing alone on that desert highway, the cold Arizona wind cutting through my jacket, and the feeling of being completely powerless is something that I will never forget. But what truly solidified it for me, that this wasn't actually a police officer, is the fact that nothing ever came from that ticket. I know for a fact that if it was legitimate, that if I didn't pay it, that there would be far more trouble. But like I said, nothing ever came from it, and so all I can conclude is that whoever that was, they were not a legitimate police officer. And so, even now when I drive late at night through remote areas, my pulse always quickens at any flashing lights behind me. And I remember just how thin the line between routine traffic stop and real danger can feel. After a breakup, I thought casual dating would be some harmless fun. I joined a dating app, clearly stating that I wasn't looking for anything serious. My goal was simple: meet someone, have a drink, maybe a dinner, and keep my life normal. I matched with Evan, a man new to the city, who seemed charming at first. He said that he wanted to explore and meet people, nothing permanent. Our first meeting was at a quiet, familiar cafe where I knew the staff and felt safe. Evan arrived early, polite and well-dressed. We talked about work. He was a freelancing graphic designer trying to make a name for himself, and our living situations too. I explained that I had a modest apartment that I could afford, thanks to careful savings. At the end of the night, he insisted on walking me home. I said no, though, preferring an Uber. He teased me a bit, suggesting that I might have plans with somebody else, and I laughed it off, but that little joke, it gnawed at me a bit. 3 days later, though, he insisted on seeing me again. This time, I chose a bistro owned by friends. From the moment that we sat down, too, Evan's tone had shifted. He criticized the food that I had ordered, even though I was paying for myself. Then he asked again if he could walk me home. While we argued, his phone rang, and I overheard, "Yeah, I'm with her. I'll stay tonight." I assumed that he was talking to a roommate, but the odd way that he said it just didn't feel right. The next morning, he appeared outside of my building, waiting to take me to a park for a picnic. His breath smelled strongly of smoke, and there was a sort of metal scent that I couldn't place. During the picnic, he tried to kiss me repeatedly. Each time I dodged, but by late afternoon I wanted to go home. Ubering back was expensive, so I reluctantly agreed to ride with him. On the drive, Evan's demeanor darkened. His voice dropped to a threatening whisper. "Why are you keeping me out of your apartment? What are you hiding?" I reminded him that I wasn't interested beyond casual outings. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly then that his knuckles whitened. He started mumbling about trust, control, and how women don't appreciate men like him. The tension in the car became suffocating. Every shadow outside seemed ominous, every passing car a potential witness to what may be about to go wrong. Thankfully, I made it home that day, but over the next few days, he escalated. He messaged constantly, claiming that he couldn't stop thinking about me and insisting on seeing me again. I finally agreed to a dinner with the strict rule that he would not pick me up this time, but he ignored it. When I came downstairs, he was waiting at my gate, uninvited. "Hey, show me which apartment's yours. I want to see where you live." My stomach instantly dropped. I insisted that we go to dinner first, but the unease in his eyes made me feel weird. At the restaurant, he received another call, and he whispered angrily and kept glancing at me. "Am I sleeping there tonight?" he asked. I said no, firmly. and he exploded into a tirade about how ungrateful and selfish I was, raising his voice in public even. Patrons turned to look, but nobody intervened. The aggression in his tone, though, sent chills down my spine. This wasn't about dating anymore. This was now about control. After dinner, he insisted on driving me back. I noticed a duffel bag in the back of his car filled with clothes and toiletries. My heart raced as I realized that he might be prepared to stay at my apartment, regardless of my consent now. During the ride, he continued berating me. "You think that I'm going to leave? You think that I'll just go?" His eyes darted toward the rearview mirror, as if testing my fear. I realized the bag in his car was a trap. He intended to move in if I let him in even once. As we pulled up to my building, I had a plan. I remembered a small cafe behind the building where I lived, leading to a secure back gate and stairwell, and I bolted the second the car slowed down, running through the cafe, ducking under the gate, and racing up to my apartment. My heart pounded so violently that I thought that it was about to burst, but I pounded on my neighbor's door, explaining everything, and they agreed to let me in and to stay alert. That night, my phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Evan. He promised that he wasn't done, that he would find a way to see me again, and that this wasn't over. Sleep was impossible now. Every noise outside made me jump. Shadows of people walking past my window made me tense. Even when I tried to block it out, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching. For weeks, I stayed inside, blinds drawn, doors locked, double-checking every lock. Friends suggested that I call the police, but without direct threats, there wasn't much that they could really do. I changed routines, took alternate routes, and avoided places that I might run into him. My life shrank into a cage of fear, I guess. Finally, though, I blocked all contact, changed my routines, and slowly regained some sense of safety. But I would be lying if I didn't say that the memory lingers. The smell in the car, the duffel bag, his obsessive insistence, all of it still sits with me. Even now, I still check my locks twice, make sure the gate is secure, and never let anyone drive me home alone anymore. Evan's presence, though gone, has definitely left a mark that I cannot shake. So I was like 7 or 8 years old, and my mum had just tucked me into bed. I fell asleep like I always did, but then I woke up sometime later to my mum's voice saying, "Time for bed, want me to tuck you in?" I was confused by this, given that she'd already tucked me in. I don't think that I responded because I was sleepy, but then something slapped me across the face really hard. I woke up, looked around, but nothing was there. Weird. Obviously, that freaked me out, so I hid under the covers and tried to go back to sleep. I was shaking, and I had that feeling like somebody else was in the room with me, standing right behind me, even though I confirmed that nobody was there. After a minute, I got slapped again though, 2 or 3 more times. This was even more confusing given that I was under the blanket now, so what the heck could be slapping me? And why did it have my mum's voice? I was obviously very freaked out, as you can imagine. I laid there in fear for what felt like an hour, unable to sleep. Then, finally, I got the courage to get out of the bed and go to my mum's room to find out if the voice that I had heard was really hers. She was asleep, though, and when I woke her up and told her what had happened, she had no idea what I was talking about. In other words, it was not her who came into my room. She was asleep the whole time. I don't know if it was paranormal or not. Maybe it was sleep paralysis or something. I definitely experienced that as a kid, but I know that I felt pretty awake after being slapped in the face like that, so I'm really not sure. If it was just the one slap that startled me awake, I would say that it was probably just a dream. But the repeated slaps after I woke up, that makes me really doubt that. The memory of this event has always stuck with me quite vividly, and the details of the story have never changed. Personally, I don't think it was sleep paralysis though, because I know what that feels like, but I really just have no idea if it was paranormal or not. I've heard some similar stories, and people are very quick to attribute experiences like that to demons, but I don't believe in that kind of thing. I'm not sure if I even believe in ghosts, in fact. All I do know is that that experience scared the heck out of me, and I just don't have a convincing explanation for it. There were a lot of other weird things that happened in that house, but that experience was by far the most extreme. So when I was in my teens, my mum and nana told me that when I was 3 or 4, I used to hide behind the sofa to talk to my friend. They assumed that I had an imaginary friend, until one day my nana asked who my friend was. I told her apparently that my friend was called Wee Stevie. He had blonde hair like me and he wanted his lemon bonbons. My mother had a younger sibling who died when he was 8, and my mum was about 16 at the time, and 4 years later at 20 she had me. Her brother was called Stephen, my nana was Scottish, and we lived not far from the English and Scottish border on the English side. So apart from my nana speaking Scottish and having an accent, my accent was very much English. So it was odd for me to use a Scottish term such as we, and I couldn't have known about Stephen really. And apparently one day before my 5th birthday, I told my nana and mum that Wee Stevie couldn't visit anymore. And that was that. He was gone and I never spoke to him again. I do have a vague memory of sitting behind the sofa talking, but I don't remember seeing him. Well, when I got into my teens, odd things began to happen in the house. Never directed at me though. Pictures would fall from walls, and over the space of 6 weeks the living room door shook very gently until the day my nana was hoovering in there, and the door shut on her and wouldn't open. I was actually there at the time that this happened. I was upstairs with my mum when we heard my nana shout. We all lived together in the same house Stephen also lived in. I ran downstairs with my mum and we both witnessed the door shake, with my nana shouting from the other side to stop it and to let her out. She thought that it was my mum, but I know that it wasn't. There was nobody around. During this time, whilst I never had anything happen directly to me, I started to feel like there was something bad in the house, and I also started having reoccurring nightmares about being in the house alone and trying to get out, but an invisible force would chase me, grab me by my feet, and drag me back into the living room. I'm 43 now, and occasionally I still have this nightmare. I just always felt like there was something negative attached to me while living there. As an adult, I've also experienced some strange occurrences over the years. Once when my son was a newborn, I'd put him in his cot to sleep at around 8 p.m, so it was pretty dark at this stage. I crept out the room and pulled the door to, leaving the landing light on. There was no light on in the room, but his baby monitor went on. I left the house to go to the car to get my bag at one stage, and when I looked up at the house, the bedroom light was now on. As I got closer to the house, I could hear him crying through the monitor. As I went into the room, he'd got tangled in the blanket, and it had covered his face and he was struggling to breathe. Well, fast forward a few years, and we'd moved house. Odd things used to happen, nothing really too weird, but just shadows which could be explained, or our dog staring at walls. It got more frequent if there had been an argument though in the house. And one morning my husband and I were having a disagreement about our business. We were sat at the kitchen table facing the living room with the door open. Our little dog was fast asleep on the sofa, when out of nowhere, a giant Yankee candle that had never been lit flew off the table and hit my husband's Xbox that was sat next to the cabinet that hard that the box ended up in the kitchen doorway. Our poor dog was terrified and ran into the kitchen to be with us. We then left this house and moved, and things seemed to escalate in our new home a lot. Our dog wouldn't let you leave him alone, which was very unlike him. As soon as you walked out of the door, he would howl and was really distressed. By this point, my son was 18, and we all felt a negative presence. You felt like you were being watched all the time, and even with the heating on and being really warm, the room would suddenly have freezing spots that you could feel with your hands. The Alexa would start playing music, although this probably does happen to other people's Alexas too, so it may not be paranormal. But one morning, my son asked me to stop coming into his room at night. I asked what he meant, and he said that he'd often wake up with his door opening, and he assumed I was standing there watching him. He'd ask what I was doing, and the door would just close slowly. It is true that a couple of times I did go into my son's room to see if he was home after he started driving, but This was only a couple of times, and my son never woke up or spoke to me, that's for sure. Then, on to my husband. So ever since we've been together, he has suffered from extreme para-insomnia. In his dreams, he constantly sees a 7-foot dark figure in the corner of the room, and this has been in every house that we've lived in. It taunts him, touches him, and watches him. He then acts out his dreams and will pull me out of the bed. He's picked our dog up and tried to escape the room. He's stood above me on the bed screaming, hit me, dragged me, and it's usually always because he's trying to either fight this thing or get me away from it. He's had para-insomnia since he was 13, but only started seeing this dark figure since he's been with me. And so, that's my story. Well, a short condensed version of it anyway. I have no idea if we're both just sensitive to this stuff or if we're both just going crazy. Our current house feels nice with a good energy. We do often feel something, but it's nice and warm, I guess. My husband still dreams about this thing too, but not as often, which we're thankful for. But the reason why I'm here is to get your thoughts. What do you guys think about all of this? This happened in 2018. My parents, my husband, and I, we were driving to Indianapolis to see some family. I'd found out about my husband's 4-month emotional affair with his unstable ex, and I was really struggling and I felt extremely alone. His ex had tried to break us up, and I was afraid that she would succeed because of how manipulative she really was. I lied and told my husband that I was having a cigarette while actually I went to the bar. I ordered 2 double vodkas with a splash of orange juice, and I was really connecting to the bartender when she said that they were closing, and so she gave me another bar that was close by. I was already feeling relaxed when I got to TGI Fridays. I ordered 2 more double vodkas, and I was pretty much wasted. So I went outside to have a cigarette and to sort of wake me up a bit. I was leaning against a light pole in the parking lot. Time passed, and I suddenly realized that I was being walked and pushed into a car. Suddenly I heard my mum yelling to stop, that I was her daughter, and this creepy man was challenging her on whether we were related. It was insane, and I don't really remember too much, but I do remember him trying to steal me, if that makes sense. This guy would not give up and was basically holding me hostage. That's when my mother said that she'd call the police, and he drove away so quickly that his passenger driver was still open. My mother and husband told me later that they tracked my phone and came to where it said that I was. I had my phone in my purse, so I don't know if the guy got rid of it or what, but whatever the case, it was very scary. They found my phone discarded. Then my mum called 911 because I was extremely drunk and am not making any sense. I woke up in the hospital. I was tied down because apparently it was for my safety. And when I actually woke up, I had huge bruises on my arm from the guy trying to get me into his car, and also an incredibly huge bruise on my chest. I didn't know what happened at the time, but I felt very guilty and never really understood what actually happened. My husband and I eventually worked it out and we're good now, but I'm thankful that my mother and him were both there that night, because if they weren't, really, I don't want to think about that. This happened about 3 years ago when I was 15. At the time, I was making pocket money by mowing the lawn at my mum's condominium. The lawnmower was kept in a small storage building where only I and the landlord had keys to. Some backstory about the building. It didn't have any windows and only one door. It consisted of only one room where the lawnmower and other gardening stuff were kept. The building's inner and outer roof had a small space in between them too. I wouldn't call it an attic, but just a space really. The inside roof was made of only spare planks, which meant that you could see into the said space. Anyways, one Sunday I needed to mow the lawn, so I took the keys and headed to the storage. The door was locked as usual, so I opened it with the keys. I stepped into the storage, and with no particular reason, I looked up, and my heart suddenly dropped. Up there, on those rickety planks, there was a man just looking down at me. I looked up only for a second or two, and he looked back at me. His clothes were dirty and face covered in scars. I didn't want him to do anything, so I just sort of pretended as if I didn't see him. I took the lawnmower, walked out the door, and closed it behind me. I immediately ran out to our apartment and called the police, who arrived in about 5 minutes. The police, they went in, and a couple of minutes later they brought out the man in handcuffs. The man had been trying to climb back into the roof while holding a pair of garden shears, and that was truly horrifying. Who knows what could have happened if I didn't look up while entering the storage. Me and my mum moved out sometime after this, but that is an event that I'm grateful that didn't turn into something worse. It was autumn in 2015. I was 23 years old. I'm now 31. And during that time I lived in Lancaster as I was studying at the university there. For those who are not familiar with the place, it's a small and rather quaint town in the northern part of England. As a student, you could either live at the university campus or in private accommodation in the town. I had decided to live in a newly built renovated apartment in a nice side of the town, and yes, it was very expensive. Now, I had already been studying for 2 years and had reached my 3rd year by this stage. At this time, I had grown accustomed to the layout of the town, and I felt comfortable and safe living there, semi-independently at least, with 2 other friends who were also studying at the university. Since my 1st year, I had decided to improve my fitness by taking nightly runs around either the campus or the town. As we were living in the town centre by my 3rd year, I would run either with my housemate or sometimes alone. The important thing to note about this place, though, is that, and this will be important for later, it's quite a large residential area that is hilly and far removed from the bustling centre, which at that time was a hub for the students or the local northern folk, probably drinking in pubs or eating pies or something. Now, occasionally, like I mentioned, I would run with my housemate. However, I preferred to run alone and listen to some kind of heavy metal. I was a big fan of Deftones during that period. On this particular day, as I said, a chilly autumn evening, I had decided to run alone, and it was about 8 p.m. and I had my headphones in. I had started to run up to the more isolated district that led up to a very pretty residential area and a large green called Williamson Park. It actually had a butterfly museum at the top of the hill. And next to the park was a very large graveyard, the kind that is miles wide and had different areas, large yew trees, crumbling graves, a crypt in the center overrun with leaves and ivy. But what was especially creepy about this particular cemetery was that it had the ruin of an old mental asylum or hospital at the other side. You could actually sneak in if you walked across the width of the cemetery and crawled through a small hole in the fence that led to the asylum grounds. This was obviously not advised though, as guard dogs roamed the derelict building all the time. It was not a place that you wanted to be during the night either. So, I had made my way past Williamson Park and up to the entrance of the graveyard. Immediately, my eye was drawn to something small standing at the imposing gates of the graveyard. They were kind of tall, black iron gates that were at the bottom of a little winding path. I felt a little apprehensive, but it wasn't unusual to see people walking their dogs, etc., out of the graveyard, so I started to slow my pace to a walk in the direction of the shape. As I drew nearer, I realized that the shape was a child, maybe around 9 to 10 years old, and they were running towards me frantically. They looked panicked and scared. I think that they were crying. I vividly remember that the girl was not wearing a coat, only a thin dress that would not be suitable for the harsh autumn here. She asked me if I could help her though. She was desperate and seemed to be frightened of something. She kept looking back into the graveyard, which at this point was totally pitch black beyond the gates. I mean, there was absolutely no light beyond that path. As the graveyard was quite large, it was chilling to see the depth of the blackness and the vulnerable child standing at the mouth of the gate, helpless like this. I don't recall what the girl said exactly, but I then offered to call the local police. I dialed 999 into my phone and had it on loudspeaker, but the girl immediately changed. She was not happy about the fact that I was calling the police. That was clear. She stopped crying and seemed angry, almost demanding, and insisted that she did not need the police to help. I reassured her that it was best to inform the police, even offered to walk her to the station, which was about 20 minutes back down the hill. And this is where the story gets weird and a little bit terrifying too. You see, the girl turned and ran back into the graveyard. She ran directly through the gates and into the eerie blackness. She didn't turn back and just ran as quickly as possible until she had completely disappeared. And it was then totally silent. I was spooked beyond belief, now standing in the darkened street completely alone. I had so many questions. Like, who was that girl? Why was she alone like this, at this hour? Why was she scared of the police? Why wasn't she frightened of the dark? Who might she be running to, or maybe from? I turned and I ran all the way back down the hill, not stopping until I had reached a well-lit, built-up area. And safe to say, I didn't run on my own again at night after that. My post-secondary classes were always at night, and I usually got out at around 11:30 p.m. Home was 5 long Florida miles away, a drive that typically took around 25 minutes. At that time, my fiancé and I were living in a brand new apartment complex on the 4th floor. From day one, though, strange things started happening. Our apartment had an unusual layout, I guess. Basically, a big circle. The bathroom connected to both the living room and the kitchen, with doors on either side, and our closet was located within it. For whatever reason, too, that closet door refused to stay shut. I tried countless experiments to figure out why, but every time without fail, I'd come back half an hour later and it would always be open. Then there was our cat. He would sit in the bathtub staring at the bathroom door, letting out these low, drawn-out meows. It was unsettling, but we figured that it was just one of those weird pet things, especially because nothing else was happening at the time. Well, until it did. One night, my fiancée called in a panic. She said someone had tried to rattle the front door handle right off the door. I checked our front door camera, but there was no sign of anyone outside. While I was still on the live feed, trying to calm her down, it happened again though, a violent, almost desperate rattling, like a grown man trying to tear the door off its hinges. The door was the only point of egress or ingress in the apartment. I told her to grab the shotgun, sit in the corner, and that I was on my way. I left class instantly, hopped onto my motorcycle, and somehow made it home in 5.5 minutes, blowing through the red lights. When I parked and got into the elevator, I suddenly felt like I'd swallowed an apple whole and couldn't breathe. It was as if an invisible weight pressed down on my chest. Still though, I pushed forward, made it to the door, and signaled for her to put down the gun. I searched the entire apartment, but there was nothing. That night passed without further incident, but from that point on, everything escalated. The strange occurrences became routine. We have 2 dogs, one of which is small, older, and a white dog, and one day she was padding through the bathroom, heading toward my bedroom to crawl under the bed, her usual cozy spot. My fiancé followed her, only to find that the dog wasn't there. After a few moments of confusion, she walked back into the living room where the dog was lying on the couch, looking as relaxed as ever. Then there were the objects. We came home one day to find all of our plates. They had been moved into the silverware drawer. On another day, we found both our ottoman and chair had been rotated to face the fish tank, almost as if in a deliberate contemplation sort of way. We decided to leave them that way. The strange occurrences continued though. We'd be walking through the apartment and suddenly hit pockets of the worst smells imaginable. And just as suddenly, the scent would vanish. We'd also hear footsteps circling around the kitchen island, even though we were alone. Things got so intense that we eventually moved our bedroom into the living room, turning the actual bedroom into my fiance's workspace. The nightmares had become relentless, and we just felt safer being in an open space like this. All in all, it was a 0 out of 10 for us, and I would not recommend. Before this, I was a devout atheist, firmly grounded in the belief that science explained everything. But after this, now, I'm more open-minded for sure. I've come to believe that there's a lot that we don't understand about what really happens in this world, and perhaps we never will. This happened in 2018 in Germany. So I was walking my dogs on the usual route that I take pretty much every day. You basically walk out of the city on a road mostly used by farmers to get to their fields, and it was a windy but clear day. Now, the first thing that I'd noticed was that my 2 dogs, both labs, didn't want to go any further. This is highly unusual because they're always excited to go on a walk, and they've never done that before or ever since then. The second thing that I noticed was that there was this weird sort of, like a low frequency humming, which sounded like it came from the sky almost. It pretty much sounded like a really loud, low flying aeroplane, so I scanned the sky, but I didn't see anything. Yes, it was weird, especially in combination with the behavior of my dogs, but I didn't really give it too much thought, and I tried to get my dogs to just keep going, but they persisted and started whining even. Now I started to worry a bit, so I looked around the area to see what could have possibly frightened them so much. That's when I saw this strange object standing in a field about maybe 15 meters off the side of the road. This field usually has horses in them, so it's surrounded by an electric fence. However, on this day there were no horses there, and this strange feeling of dread or primal fear suddenly filled my body completely when I stared at this object, maybe because it didn't look like anything that I'd ever seen before. I felt like I was stuck on the road and I just couldn't move. I noticed now that this object, which I firstly believed to be some sort of machine because of its silver or chrome color, had vague human-like features. It had 4 limbs, all ending in sharp edges. They had some sort of black material or liquid on them as if it had dipped them in oil. Its head also had clear edges and looked very unorganic, I guess, like it was constructed. It looked directly at me and I could see that it was sort of blinking permanently. Its nose and mouth looked more like openings in its head. The longer I looked at it, the more strange things I noticed and the stranger I felt myself, like I was looking at something so foreign to my understanding of the world and life that I was about to fall apart. On top of its head too, it had this sort of cone-like structure cut out of the very top where some sort of orb was. It looked like a perfect golden ball and it was reflecting the sunlight. I also began to notice maybe the weirdest feature of this thing was that it was extremely muscular. Still, it looked more like a shell in which muscles were carved than actually organic matter, I guess. I also saw what looked like cables on its upper body and arms, as well as stripes on its arms and legs. As embarrassing as it is, I honestly felt like I was about to wet myself, so I tried with every fiber of my being to turn around, and when after about 30 seconds I could move again, I ran away as fast as I could, with my dogs following quickly behind me. I did tell my parents and brothers, and together we checked the spot again, but when we got there, it was gone. To this day, I genuinely hate myself for leaving my phone at home because even though my parents say that they believe me, I get this weird feeling that they actually don't. I actually went to therapy about this encounter because I was really struggling with what I had seen. I've never had any other kind of hallucinations in my life. I've never taken any drugs, and I don't have any mental illness, which could explain what I saw that day. I cannot rationalize it, and it made my already bad anxiety feel much worse. It felt like I saw something which I just wasn't meant to, something which my brain just couldn't process. Now, 6 years later, I'm better, but still think about what I saw basically every day. I still live here, and that spot is only a little ways away. Sometimes I go on walks there, but always with my brother, and every time I hear an aeroplane, I get really uncomfortable and make sure that it's actually a plane. I even downloaded the app Flight Radar to make sure that there was actually a plane in the area when I hear one. The reason that I'm sharing this now too is that I'm hoping to find out if anybody else has seen something like this. Maybe somebody has experienced something similar to me, and if so, then please do tell me because I would love to know that I'm not alone. I work at a retail grocery chain, and in the store there is a liquor department which is sectioned off from the rest of the grocery store. I was working in that department when a man came in. He purchased a few alcohol shots and made conversation with me. Everything was pretty normal until he pulled an axe out of his back pocket. I was completely shocked, to be honest. It seems really odd to say, but seeing this very strange man rambling about how nobody would dare mess with him because of his axe, well, it made me freeze in my spot. He held it out in the open and kept mentioning how sharp the blade was. He cut his receipt in half on the counter in front of me to demonstrate just how sharp the blade was. He was mentioning how it would cut through bone and flesh. I tried not to escalate the situation and didn't really react or say much about the axe. I'm ashamed to say that I was sort of frozen and didn't tell him to put it away or leave or anything. I wanted to keep everything calm and get him out as quickly as I could. I let my supervisor know immediately once he left. She pulled me aside and asked me to describe the man. A security officer was able to identify the man on camera. My store manager ended up contacting the police. I gave a police officer my recounting of the events, and he informed me that he spoke with the individual outside in the parking lot and that they would be trespassed from the store. It was incredibly unnerving, though, being in that situation, in an isolated area with somebody who seemed to be mentally unstable, holding a huge, very sharp axe. So I'm 21, and I'm not sure if gender really matters to this story, but I'll say it anyway, I'm female. Now, this might sound maybe a tad bit overdramatic, since it's been years since this incident has happened that caused this fear, but I just wanted to get it off my chest as someone who doesn't really talk about it. I personally found this encounter super creepy, especially getting older and being able to look back on it all. I've learned a lot from it, so maybe sharing it here, what happened, could either guide others to stay alert that it could happen to them, or at least know the signs. So I live in rural Ohio, and there's not much that goes on here. We don't live in the best area either, with lots of druggies and pedos. Just if you have kids, you really shouldn't live around here, basically. When I was younger, we didn't really worry much about anything happening to us or questionable things due to the fact that our family is known in this area. And my grandpa was a known cop for many years and was extremely respected, and people knew that he would fight over us. So nobody really messed with us. We also lived around multiple other children our age. It also wasn't uncommon to let your kids run around by themselves before nighttime because our neighborhood essentially relied on each other and the other kids to keep each other safe, and it worked for the most part. We also knew what people to stay away from, and they knew to stay away from us as well. So, When I was in middle school, the bus ran at 7 a.m., and we would have to be at the end of our long driveway by that time to catch the bus on time. This happened during the winter, and our bus tended to be late sometimes and would reach us around maybe 7:05 to 7:15 at the latest. But we made sure to be out at 7 a.m. just in case they were on time. It was me and my two cousins. One was 4 years younger than me, and the other was a year older, but we were in the same grade. The road is straight where our driveway is, so cars come by multiple times, and you would be able to see if a car was slowing down and such, and they'd see us as well. We were always told to stand by the end of the driveway and always keep a distance, so if a drunk driver or whatever happened to be swerving, that we would be okay for the most part. We were at the age where me and my cousin, who was in the same grade as me, essentially babysat the younger cousin, and we didn't have any adults accompanying us at the end of the driveway anymore. Now, it was super cold that day and the sun was just coming up, and we were annoyed because the bus was late while waiting in the cold. I noticed a car was coming, and again, this happened all the time, so it wasn't like I was checking it out or anything. I just noticed it and went back to listening to music on my phone. I hear a loud brake sound though, so I look up and the car is in front of our driveway now, fully stopped. The man in the car was waving his hand toward us to signal us to come closer to him, and of course I refused and was frozen in my spot because this had never happened before. He could tell that we were obviously shaken back by this and said that he worked for a school but was lost and he just got hired. He named a school that was about an hour away as well. I want to remind you too that it's past 7 a.m. at this point, and I immediately knew that he was lying. It didn't make any sense to me why he would be lost at a job that he said that he'd already got. Plus, it being this late, I'd think that he would probably be at the school by now. What I'm trying to say is that there is no way that he would be lost to the point that he's an hour away from the district and signaling children to his car the way that he did if he was a teacher at all. It also made no sense to me logically how he would be lost from a job that he obviously had to go to in order to get hired for. This was before Zoom and all those things, I'm pretty sure. So I immediately said that I'm going to go and get an adult, and he clearly panicked at that and said that it wasn't necessary, that he just wanted us to get closer and show him where to go. I pointed straight. I truly don't know the direction to the district, but that was not my main focus, obviously. I told him to go straight and he ignored me. My little cousin was moving towards his car and I grabbed him by his hair and kept him by me. I refused to let go of his head as well. I'm shaking and I'm trying to not show that I'm scared because I don't know what's about to happen. The driveway is a long one as well, and I certainly didn't feel safe turning my back on him. I have my other hand on my phone and I'm shaking, so I'm struggling with gloves on, but I'm able to call my mum and thank God that she answers. She usually would ignore my calls and be on the phone with her boyfriend. The guy then gets out of his car when he sees that I'm on the phone with someone, and I start immediately sobbing and telling my mum that there's a man out here and I think he's going to hurt us. She comes out running, and the second that she gets closer and he sees her, he bolts back to his car and dashes away. And that's when I noticed another car that was around the corner of the road also dashed away as well. Looking back on this thing, it's even more scary since if it was just someone who needed to get past said car that was in the middle of the road by our driveway, they would have just either honked or gone on the other lane to pass them. They definitely also saw the entire thing, and they also didn't get out of their car to help us or anything. So it makes me think that they were also in on this entire situation. I was forced to go to school that day, and my mum calls the cops, and when I get home, I found out even more horrible news that just made me realize my gut feeling was absolutely correct. My mum told them the car and how it looked and such, and they found an abandoned car that matched her description just up the road. So they found who it belonged to and eventually found out that he was not a school teacher. He worked on the barges, and the cops said that they thought that it dealt with sex trafficking from the looks of it, and they didn't even catch him since they already left on the boat or whatever. But quite honestly, who knows what would have happened if he had got one of us. I'm assuming that we would have been on that boat and, well, horrible things would have happened. It still makes me angry that he was never caught and possibly other kids were victims of this. It's terrifying, and to this day I refuse to go near that road. I still have reoccurring nightmares from time to time about the whole situation. I'm always on alert now too, which I most definitely should have been more alert back then. But hey, I was just a kid and clearly didn't realize how it would have affected me in real time. This was a few years ago. I purchased my childhood home with my husband, and the first couple of years, we had a toxic roommate who would put us against each other, and over time, he ended up staying in his room all the time, falling into a depression. He found a boyfriend and eventually moved out. I wasted no time turning the spare room into a guest quarters. I started having horrible insomnia, so to allow my husband to sleep undisturbed, I moved into the guest room. And this is where things got dark. So I finally found a healthy sleeping pattern, and it was working for me and I was getting some real sleep. That's when the nightmares started though. A clown was in the closet, but not just any clown, a demonic, evil, twisted clown. I'm not afraid of clowns in the slightest, but he kept telling me that I was to be his bride and that I needed to kill everyone that I loved in order to bring him fully into this world. And in my nightmares, I would plan with him and agree. I would wake up, and the weirdest thing would be that the closet door, which had been closed and latched with an old school hook and eye latch, would be wide open and everything in it disheveled. I feared the ex-roommate's depression had opened a doorway for darkness to enter, as he was in a very vulnerable state when he occupied this room. After weeks and weeks of these nightmares, every night, I finally decided to cleanse this room. I opened the front door and burned sage. My husband and I both have indigenous ancestry, so the burning of sage is a cleanse our ancestors held sacred. I started in the attic, making certain the smoke touched even the darkest corners, and cleansed room by room. When I began in the spare room, though, suddenly the light bulb exploded. The doorknobs rattled. I didn't stop. I pushed until I felt the energy finally leave the home. My husband, who was outside with our dog now, knew when it was over. I never said a word because he saw the darkness shoot out the front door allegedly. We've had no issues since then. The nightmare stopped immediately. The closet door remained closed and latched. But I will never forget the hopelessness and darkness that I felt in those dreams. And I guess that I'll never know why it showed itself to me as a clown. Back in 2009, 4 friends and I were walking home from a basketball game in the suburbs that is near our neighborhood. It was around 8 p.m. and it was pretty dark. There were 2 ways to go in my neighborhood. The first one was the shortcut, which consisted of cutting through the middle of an abandoned paintball park in an open field, and it will take around 10 minutes to arrive to our homes. The second was the long way, which takes 25 to 30 minutes walking in a bright area, surrounded by houses and endless illuminated roads that finished right on the entrance of the abandoned park, and then 5 minutes of walking in semi-illuminated areas again. We took the shortcut though, like we did every time, but this time everything was quiet, no animal sounds. Abandoned dogs took shelter here all the time, so that was odd not to hear them. No cars sounding from anywhere nearby, and it was just pure silence this night. One of my friends decided to just start talking about how it must be really cool to play Ouija boards in the middle of the field as a bit of a joke. We tell him to shut up collectively because we were a little bit on edge, and we all see the entrance of the park and we all start getting less stressed and start talking again. We were about 100 feet from the entrance when we all hear and feel stomps coming from behind us, but not regular stomps, heavy stomps, almost like an elephant or a bull running. We look back and There was this strange-shaped creature with really dim red eyes at first, looking completely dark, but as it got closer it was sort of greyish and charging toward us. We collectively looked at each other and we ran as fast as we could toward the entrance, and we managed to get out of there. While walking, there is a part of the street that briefly overlooks the field, and we all looked to see if we could see anything down there, but all we saw was dim red dots looking directly at us, we think at least. We all went home, and the next day we tried to figure out what actually happened. 4 out of 5 of us can confirm this story, and sadly one of my friends passed away a couple of years ago. I also moved, but have to travel every weekend through that area to visit my family, and whenever I go by that place, it still gives me the creeps going through there at nighttime. I'm a 20-year-old man from the Philippines, and even though this incident occurred back in 2013, over a decade ago now, I still find myself haunted by it every time that I return to my hometown. At the time, I was just an 18-year-old college student. It was the night of our department socialization party, which had wrapped up at around midnight. As the only one among my friends with a car, I had always taken on the role of the designated driver. After dropping my friends off at their homes, I was parking in my usual spot, just a few houses away from my own, due to the limited parking in our area. I was about to exit the car when I noticed a girl standing near the entrance of the alleyway leading to my house and several others, wearing a shirt with our department's logo. I assumed that she had just walked back from the party. In front of her, a man in his late 20s, clad in a hoodie, stood ominously, seemingly blocking her path. The girl, she immediately locked eyes with me, and I recognized her expression. It was a silent plea for help. Instinct kicked in. I grabbed my bag and stepped out of the car. The man, noticing my presence, began to walk into the alleyway. When I reached the girl, he had thankfully vanished from sight. It felt as though whatever threatening situation had occurred moments before, that now it was over, and I was tempted to walk away. But then I caught sight of the strange man again. He was leaning against the wall of a nearby house, his gaze fixed on me. A chill ran down my spine, and just then the girl called out from behind me. Her voice trembled with fear, and I saw her approach, visibly shaken. "Can you walk with me to my apartment at the end of the alleyway?" she asked, explaining that the man had been silently blocking her way. I glanced back at the man. He appeared intoxicated, perhaps drunk or maybe even on drugs. We began to walk. Our breaths shallowed as we passed by him. After putting some distance between us, I glanced back, and to my horror, he was now following us. We had already passed my house at that point, but I couldn't leave this girl to face him alone. As fear coursed through me, she suddenly broke into a full sprint, and I had no choice but to keep pace with her. We reached the gate to her apartment, and she hastily swung it open, slamming it shut behind us. We then dashed into the building where a second gate stood, this one smaller, likely designed to keep pets from escaping. She opened it, and we slipped through just as the sound of the man approaching the first gate reached our ears. We bolted up the stairs, making our way to the 3rd floor. Breathless, the girl knocked urgently but softly at her apartment door, and after what felt like an eternity, it swung open, revealing her friends, a guy and a girl around her age. They looked bewildered but quickly locked the door behind us and led us into the bedroom. They turned off the lights, and we all just sort of sat there silently with our hearts pounding. The girl suddenly broke down in tears, recounting the terrifying events to her friends. She revealed that the man had been following her for at least 10 to 15 minutes, and she expressed relief at having seen me. Unsure of what to do next, I called my aunt, who was staying at our house that night. Thankfully, she answered swiftly. I urged her to call the police, and at this time we could now hear the man pacing around the apartment, seemingly looking for us. He was mumbling something that we couldn't quite hear well from the other side of the door. A few minutes later, my phone rang with an unknown number. It was my uncle, who was a policeman, reassuring me that help was on the way. What felt like hours dragged on, and eventually the police did arrive. My uncle instructed me via phone to come downstairs and recount the ordeal to the officers. They informed us that they had seen the man wandering around the gate and eventually into the far end of the alleyway. Once the police had finished their inquiries, they allowed me to go home. I recounted the entire story to my aunt, who urged me to go get some rest. Despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me as my mind raced with thoughts of the strange man. I mean, what if he had caught up to us, armed with a knife or some weapon? I fought to dispel the terrifying images racing through my mind, but I just couldn't shake the feeling that he might be watching me in the dark, a knife glinting menacingly in his hand. So my boyfriend has a friend that is about 60 years old that owns a house that was built around the 1800s. The house is in the middle of nowhere, secluded from any other houses for miles. It's the only house in the area surrounded by trees, and to add on to the uncomfortable environment, the house does not have a streetlight since it was built in the 1800s. My boyfriend was told by the lady that she would pay him to watch her house for like 8 months. She was going to Mexico for the winter because she doesn't like the winter very much, so she often goes there and stays with her friends. She said that she would pay him double if he actually stayed in the house. He agreed because he didn't really have much money to begin with, and he had already worked for her, so why not? I was pretty excited too because the lady also made a point that I could stay as well, and I really was eager to get out of my parents' house during the weekends. Those were the only times that I could stay over. My boyfriend started staying the night before me though, and he would always come over to my house and tell me that he's going crazy at the lady's house because he feels dread and like he's just unwelcome there. I, knowing my boyfriend, thought that this was one of his overreactions. He has them in certain situations that he's not familiar with, so I told him that I'm pretty sure that it was fine, but man, I was so wrong. So the first weekend I stayed there, it was okay. I felt a bit off, I guess, but my boyfriend insisted that we check the whole house top to bottom because he felt as though someone was in the house. I didn't think so, but I said okay in the end. So we started checking the house, and we checked every room top to bottom, even the basement that was more like a dungeon, to be honest. And there was nothing. So I told him that there was nothing and to just let it go and to just go to bed. We went into the bedroom and he locked the door and put his knife under his pillow. I didn't ask why in the end because I thought that I knew, and we just went to bed.
There is evil. It lives on social media. Today, we are going to delve into some things that will be triggering beyond a single listed tag. So be warned, there are no holds barred when it comes to the sickness of the internet. I was a moderator and report handler for this particular social media website over the course of several years. For legal reasons, I can't name the company, but if you put your head in a novel, you'll know who I'm referring to. Why am I posting it here instead of somewhere else? Simple. Hide in plain sight. The social media conglomerate assures the outside world that it takes care of its staff, has mental health professionals in place, and everyone is routinely cycled to ensure they don't spend too long on certain zones that house the most extreme content. That's an outright lie. In my time working for this media giant, I saw wide-eyed, fresh-faced newbies walk through our doors and within 6 months become shells of their former selves. Unable to face people in the outside world, knowing damn well what depravity lurks beneath that thin veneer of pleasantries. Out of my initial team of 60, half of them were addicts within the first year. Painkillers, sleeping tablets, stronger substances, you name it. A dozen would attempt to end their lives within 18 months, 7 of which succeeded. Our ops manager, Ken, came in after a particularly difficult weekend handling the leaked war videos from a remote region in Africa. Sifting through the reports with all of us. He was always trying to raise our spirits, encourage us to do group bonding activities or bring in nice food to help lighten the mood. But that day, he just looked broken.
Everyone, I thank you for your time here. I'm sorry that I won't be able to continue on this journey with you, but I can't do this anymore. Don't let my wife see me, please.
We turned, bewildered, as he pulled out a gun and pointed the barrel to the roof of his mouth and pulled the trigger without hesitation. The shot rang out, bursting my eardrums as blood and brain matter stained the ceiling and floor. His body twitched for a moment before falling to the ground with a sickening thud. I'd never seen such a horrific sight. We were all given free counseling, and everyone in the office that day who'd seen it was given 9 days paid vacation. Yeah, 9 days. Welcome to America. Another one of my colleagues, Trisha, brought in a box cutter to work and excused herself during the middle of the night shift. After downing half a bottle of painkillers, she sliced her wrist to pieces and bled out in the bathroom stall. Trisha started here as a former Lutheran minister, just looking to enjoy her early retirement and put some good out into the world. She thought she might deal with the occasional dick pic or offensive gesture, but not the torrent of terror that greeted her screen for 8 hours a day, 4 times a week. She was a mother of 2 teenage sons and a pillar of her community. The last thing she'd seen on her screen was a Mexican cartel execution video, where they tortured, assaulted, and set fire to another member's sister to send a message. But I don't know if it was just that sent her over the edge. It's never that simple. No, I think, as in many of the cases, it was the sheer volume of people unashamedly commenting their enjoyment of the content, even on their professional accounts. One said,
"Holy shit, this is some sick stuff. Hey, Jay Manny, you gotta see this, bro."
Another one said,
"Oh my god, is this real? No way, she got burned."
People rarely ever think before they type. If you've listened this far, I will not be surprising you with some sightings of aliens or monsters. I don't need to. The monsters exist in our communities. The demons and nightmares we seek in a state of curiosity are just behind a screen. But there are things I've seen that keep me up at night with endless questions, mysteries that will forever remain unsolved. I saw a Vice documentary where a colleague spoke out on his experiences and how damaging it was for him. It emboldened me to do the same, hiding myself in plain sight where nobody will ever think to verify. I have a lot of stories from my time here, and I'll start with the ones that are the most palatable. Report 1 for the mods.mov. I was working the night shift with a small team in a new extreme exposure moderation team that the company was trialing. You had to volunteer, go through a fortnightly evaluation, and got double pay as a result, so it was hard to say no. I remember one of my staff members, Jeff, punching a hole through his desk in a fit of rage and screaming expletives that would wake the dead. He frothed at the mouth as I came over, putting a reassuring hand on his shoulder. I didn't need to say anything. We were all in this shit together, so I looked over and saw the last bit of his conversation. Jeff had been flagging content in a closed group that circulated photographs of underage teens and extremist views. You don't see many of the former pop up openly anymore, but the latter are hiding in plain sight under the guise of being a specific kind of shitposting group. Most of the members are your normal, dark-humored folks who may be edgy, but know the line. But there was always a group amongst them harboring some vile, hateful views that they propagate freely within the group's borders. In any case, Jeff had been trying to reason with the admin of one of the groups, something moderators do not do too much anymore, but was a little bit more common back then. To avoid this getting pulled, I'll be replacing all the racial and homophobic slurs, but this guy was not pulling any punches in his complaints to Jeff.
"What the hell, man? Why are you getting involved in screwing up my shit? You're nothing but an NPC, you little beta bitch. What are you, queer? You don't like tits? Get a fucking life, you snowflake."
I'm sorry, sir, but your group was sharing what was reported to be minors. It must be investigated and is passed on to the relevant authorities in your area. Your account will be suspended until further notice.
Oh, so now you want to get in my business, huh? If they want to send that kind of stuff, that's on them. Not my fault, bro. But that's fine. You want to ban me? Well, I'll go out with a bang, then. I hope this haunts you for the rest of your pathetic life, you cunt.
Before a second backup admin account posted a video entitled, for the mods.mvo. A large neckbeard-looking guy in his late 20s positioned a handycam on a table before hobbling into view. It was greasy. his spectacles clinging to his piggy head, and chins quivering as he breathed heavily before grabbing something from the ground. It was a small bag that looked like it had something struggling inside to get out.
You did this!
He screamed before smashing the bag against the table. I heard wet, meaty sounds of bone breaking. Then he proceeded to smash it 5 more times on the table. When he was done, he smeared what looked like blood all over his face.
Unban me, or I will do worse.
We didn't, obviously. The sicko was arrested on child pornography and animal abuse charges and went to prison for some time. But not before Jeff got to him. Jeff tracked down his address using our database and put a sustained beating on the guy, knocking out several of his teeth, perforating his eardrums and breaking his nose. Jeff was sadly fired, and he went to prison too for battery and assault, though the judge did hold sympathy for him. I miss Jeff. He was a good guy and just wanted to do good in the world. That was one of the first times fear gripped me in such a way that I couldn't shake it. I took up smoking weed that same weekend, and by God, if that hasn't been the driving force behind why I didn't follow Ken into the afterlife. On to our next report, one that showed what mob mentality will do unabated and unrestricted, for better or for worse. This isn't about sending a grander message of tolerance or an allegory for something hopeful. This is about letting you know of the vile underbelly that lurks just a few clicks away from your wholesome puppy videos and good vibe memes. You probably know there's a market for everything. Crushing kittens, smoking kinks, diaper fetishes, but one man took that to the extreme on his custom live videos. Report 2, The Itch. The report came in after the first live session. Multiple users flagged his content for self-harming, and it was immediately clear why. Mr. Payne, a terrible alt name, I know, had told him he'd send him 50 if he burned his arms with a cigar, so he did, leaving bloodied and pus-filled holes along his forearms. He also self-flagellated, pulled off his nails and slammed his head into a desk. Each time the task was done, he'd get a payment and his smile would widen, almost euphoric. By the time I swept in to delete the account and try to order a welfare check, it was apparent that it was going to take some digging to find his actual info. As soon as one alt went down, another would pop up with the atypical nuked or some strange amalgamation of fictionalized and memed names to make them harder to track. They got more aggressive the more we fought against them too. Mr. Payne would appear looking tired and dejected before a session. It was like a drug. The comments would berate him, call him slurs and awful things while offering him more for his suffering. The final live feed went up on December 31st, 2020. Mr. Payne had been talking about a constant itch just above his temple and was scratching at it profusely. Dirty, yellowing fingernails pulling away dead skin cells at a frantic pace. He groaned about the incessant itching as the skin caked under his nails, looking at the messages. One commenter said,
"Keep scratching until it bleeds. I want to see suffering. Prove you're a big man and I'll transfer you 100 when I see blood."
He did as he was told. I skipped ahead a few minutes until blood was pouring down his fingers and soaking his hand. He smiled and said it still itched. Another commenter said,
"Dig in there. Find the root cause. Something is skittering around in your brain and it's made you a sicko."
as he offered him $300 if he got in deep. Again, he complied. It was sickening to see the efforts he was going to just for strangers. Another one said,
"You should have never jumped through that window, you sick pup. Now you're just our plaything. Our new Mr. Payne."
"Wait, window? What was that about?" A ding rattled off in the chat, and Mr. Payne's eyes fluttered as he carried on digging. He was being pumped full of something each time he did as he was told. Pain needles, maybe? Either way, he did the job, and 2 of his fingers came out of the rapidly widening wound in his head. I swear I could see a portion of his skull poking out.
"Time to finish. Your face needs to go. It stared down at too many innocents while you did your thing. 2000s to make it all stop. Pull at that wound and do not stop until you hear the ding. You took their innocence. We take your identity."
His eyes widened, and drool left his mouth in a moment of pure fear. I felt sick and powerless. He did as instructed. He gripped the side of the wound with his free hand and muttered how sorry he was over and over, all while the chat flooded with messages of contentment.
You deserve this.
He pulled hard, and I made it another few seconds before clicking off, pulling the video and vomiting into the trash by my desk. They found his body. He'd managed to get down to the jawline before shock and blood loss had him pass out, a flood of opioids to the system causing an overdose. In his apartment were stacks of papers about conferring with the dead, seances, and retribution for past sins. Mr. Payne had been a serial abuser since he was a teen, and arrogant when caught. It was only after an extended absence that anyone even caught on to the issue. Problem is, the guy laying there wasn't Mr. Payne. It was another one of his victims. The real Mr. Payne was nowhere to be seen. The commenters were simply buying an audience to a torture session in plain sight. Who needs red rooms when you have private groups for just about anything? The chat was still open when they found him. He'd been laying there for 3 days, and they were still mocking his corpse. I was given 3 weeks paid leave and offered a low-fee counselor who didn't even specialize in trauma on my return. I declined. I just quietly accepted the under-the-table salary bump and got on with my day. If I didn't do it, who would? Report 3. Time to finish up this set of reports, with the one that haunts me the most of the first 3 I'm sharing today. In 2017, we started getting a lot more unusual ARG reports coming in. Mostly just boomers and easily offended folk trying to sabotage a clearly fake piece of advertisement for a new horror game or upcoming movie. There is indeed a fine line between being too sensitive. There is a fine line between being too sensitive and genuine offense. It just isn't what the media or idiots in politics think it is, but that's besides the point. The one that we received the largest influx of reports for in a 3-month period was titled Happy Home Tour, a series of posts that honestly baffled me in the beginning, but would become a terrifying reminder of learning to be objective. The post would always get removed for spam, statutes which made no sense followed by comments within seconds of each other after that, while typed out with thought also made no sense. They'd be made by a genuine account of a genuine person, whose friends list was also entirely composed of alts of themselves with slightly altered names and distorted versions of their faces, each one arguing with one another over and over. The few friends they did have who were real people were constantly concerned over their behavior, said they were schizophrenic and couldn't even be reached in person anymore. They'd just ignore calls at the door. Then the photos started. First time report was just a woman taking a photo of her reflection in the window, a bouncing baby in her hand, and the caption,
"Can't wait to open the window and breathe real air for the first time in a long time."
As it passed my desk, I was confused. It looked innocuous enough to me at first glance, but it was when I looked at the adjacent message from the user who reported it that I realized we may have a problem.
Miss Sanford does not have children.
An immediate call to CPS was made, as well as the local law enforcement, but when they went to investigate, Sadie, the woman in the photos, simply brushed it off and showed them the doll she was posing with. According to them, she was of perfectly sound mind, and there was no issue. I got a stern warning from my boss and continued on, a little more wary as other reports came in of her spam statuses and strange photos.
That's not her baby. These rooms look wrong. She's not in her own home.
The pets don't look right. Their eyes are glazed over. There shouldn't be anyone in the house. Sadie doesn't like visitors.
That doesn't look like her. Someone's impersonating her.
And so on. Maybe this was all just a long con to showcase a new movie, documentary, or game. ARGs, or alternative reality games, a clever way to market a new concept, have proven wildly successful in recent years, so it's not too far-fetched. Eventually, I would just automate a dismissal, even as the reports got more frantic and pleading. I couldn't keep wasting my time on it, not when we had an influx of Nazi propaganda, animal abuse, and God knows what else floating around freely. That would prove to be one of my biggest mistakes. A series of videos entitled Happy Home Tour would be uploaded on the night of August 16, 2019. In the first one, Sadie was holding the camera as she walked around her rather modest estate.
Hi guys! So I wanted to show you all how I lived and what it was like to be in my home. My therapist says this is an important part of their therapy technique, that doing this will help me process. Not sure how, but why not? And you all get to see in the process. We'll start in the entrance. This is the hallway and foyer leading into the grand living room. A good journey always starts here.
The camera panned the wall and went through the crimson alleyway. paintings hanging on the walls of artists I didn't recognize. It lingered over one painting I did know, Kronos Devouring His Son by Francisco Goya. The camera shook slightly before the jubilant voice returned and she turned into the living room. It took a minute to realize what was wrong with the scene. Like my eyes weren't quite adjusted, despite the years of ugliness I'd been exposed to. Sadie talked over it like it was nothing, panning around a large open space filled with antiques, bespoke furniture, and a roaring fireplace.
Yeah, so this is the living room. We spend a lot of time relaxing here and thinking on our lives up to this point. How we got here, where we're going, and what to do with that time. Usual adult stuff, right?
In the center of the living room was a tarp, smeared with blood and dirty utensils strewn about it carelessly. Something was writhing in a body bag as she came across it.
Well, this is it for the living room. Stay tuned for our next entry in the Happy Home Tour. Bye-bye!
Sweat filled my brow as I immediately dialed the authorities, before pausing and my rational brain kicked in. This could still be an ARG. You have to do your job. I continued on to the next video, knowing it was my job to see this through to the end, whether I wanted to or not.
Welcome back to the Happy Home Tour. This time, we're going to start in the kitchen before taking a look at the upstairs bedrooms where a special secret is waiting for us. Let's go.
The women were acting as if she were a YouTube vlogger, with an infectious personality, but after what I'd seen, I felt sick.
So, here's our kitchen. We make some truly yummy meals in here. We make sure to never waste a morsel, and anyone who steps through our door gets fed.
She scans the room briefly. Knives are scattered across the marble countertop, and something is boiling on the stove. I hear the sound of a closet door creaking open before Sadie's foot smashed against it with extreme prejudice.
Now we move to the first bedroom. Come on.
She races up the stairs, and the paintings on the wall are a blur of colors, and briefly spied scenes of violence filled the screen until she reached the pink door. Junie's special room. My stomach dropped into my feet. I know something is behind that door that I don't want to see, but it's my job, so I continued.
This is a special room for Junie. Well, mine too. See, me, Junie, and Guthrie all have our own rooms, but Sadie and I sometimes have sleepovers and share.
The camera shakes violently as Sadie's hand is placed on the door, and for the first time, I can detect genuine fear in her voice.
Oh, Junie doesn't want me to go in there. She says that she's got to be the one to give the tour.
A pause, then a lower, gruffer voice calls out from behind the camera.
All right, fuckers, let's dive in.
She kicks the door in, and light pools into the room. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some frilly pink and almost childlike toys to match the clearly cracked mental state of this woman? But no, it was barren. The floorboards scratched to hell, and the windows covered with thick wood and tinfoil. A filthy mattress sat in the corner with a pile of princess clothes by the side. Junie made an ear-piercing shriek as she stepped into the room, like a war cry. Then, for the briefest of seconds, I see someone curled up in the corner, emaciated, matted hair, and almost naked, as milky, sun-bleached eyes fixate on the camera and grow wide with fear. They shake uncontrollably and shriek back at the camera before the video ends. I can't tell if it's a child, an imprisoned person, or just more of a setup for this pseudo-game or art piece some weirdo is setting up for their debut at a film festival, but I'm thoroughly unsettled. I'm the team manager, but I can tell this is above my pay grade, and before I click the final video, I call over to my ops manager, Lloyd. He's young, vivacious, and knowledgeable, toes the company line, but knows full well how much strain we're under. He keeps his distance from the really gritty stuff, especially after what happened to his predecessor. He commented on how messed up it is, but it doesn't warrant a removal. He asked if I could handle the last one, said he'd do a check on the name and report to the authorities, even hoping it's an actress. He put a reassuring hand on my shoulder, telling me he'd make sure me and my team rotated around after this one was done. All I could do was smile and nod. I didn't like where it was going, but you sign up for this, so you do it. The third video loads, and it's an unflattering shot of Sadie, as if she wasn't fully aware the camera was on. Her left eye was half open, and the other was wide, pupil dilated and her lips parted. She was marveling at something. Off camera, something smacked against the floor repeatedly.
You know what's really good about Windows? I mean, aside from the obvious of letting in light and being practical.
She laughs, and it's shrill, hoarse, unsettling. The camera passes, and I see another one on the floor, thrashing.
They're amazing conduits for the other side. Think of a mirror. You are always blocking the view to that other place. That better place where everything you want is there. You are quite literally standing in your own way, but not with a window. No siree. A window can be just a normal apparatus of glass and material, unless you know how to make it something else, like I do.
The camera pans to the hallway. It is covered in the thick, translucent tarp from before. 4 bodies wrapped in layers upon layers of cling film, and a thick liquid that pooled around them and led to the door. The camera passing over each of the thrashing bodies of different sizes, and a note affixed to each one. Sadie, Guthrie, Junie, Michael. What the hell was going on? The camera stops outside a black, charred door. A pale blue light leaked out from the gap in the bottom. The camera fuzzed over and distorted when it focused on it, but the woman kept speaking. Her voice quivered as she spoke.
What lies in this house is nothing but dead memories. What lays beyond the window is devoid of suffering. No pain, no judgment for being who I am, or for things I cannot control. At least I can take someone new with me, unsullied.
And that's when I heard it. The crying of the baby. CPS had checked, assured it wasn't a baby. But I could hear it clear as day. The camera focused on just Sadie's face as she opened the door and the blue light covered her face. She cried tears of joy as the baby screamed. My legs tensed up, heart racing.
It's everything I wanted it to be.
She took steps into the room and didn't hesitate to open the window, letting in a gust of air as she smiled and took one last look at the camera.
Time to start again. I hope when you find your window, you have the courage to step through it too.
She lit a match, and I saw something flicker in the dark corner of the room. Then she threw it behind her and grinned. The video ended and was frozen by the image of her manic grin. I took the video down, but the damage was already done, and made copies of the video to share around. It would come out that a woman in the area had lured in and kidnapped down on their luck citizens and runaways, keeping them in the home and drugging them as they slept. People were convinced someone must have helped her, but there was no signs of an accomplice. Last I heard, they were shifting through the rubble to find a scrap of evidence or information about the bodies, the woman, or anything. They turned up 2 pieces of information, 2 things that haunted me long after I closed the case and took annual leave. The first was that there was no window on the 2nd floor remotely large enough for her to fit through. The sole operable window was in the bathroom, and not only did the decor in the video not match, but it needed a lot more effort to get through. Second was that they found the remains of one verifiable victim, Miss Sanford, and she was 8 months pregnant. I hate interacting with other human beings nowadays. Being a social media moderator for so long taught me to spot red flags all over. Every archetype laid bare, and each one possessing all capabilities to be the next one on the reporting chopping block for those that would make your stomach turn. Someone had to say something. These are just a few examples of the ones that go on behind closed doors, both in the homes of these animals and the corporate world that monitors and safeguards against their content. What you have seen reported in exclusive articles or come out in court is a fraction of the true horrors. Maybe I'll share some more, who knows. Give me a couple days to decompress and keep your eyes peeled. It was an incident following in the footsteps of the Happy Home Tour that would lead me to resigning the job and becoming a full-time freelancer in journalism. I'd always had a knack for words, and investigative journalism just had a good ring to it. I needed something to get up for in the morning. It also reminded me that for all the monsters that lurk in the shadows, the nightmares we talk about around campfires and beasts we fear will come in the night and snatch us away. They're meters away from us at all times, connected through a screen and able to share their exploits with the world. Delete your social media, or at least limit your exposure to it. Spending too much time on there is like wading in the shadows of a black sea. You have no idea what kind of creatures are waiting for you in the depths. Report 4, Drive. I want to start off by telling you about another employee on our sister building, Yardley Heights, and what Nicholas did leading up to his dismissal. Some have mentioned surprise that Jeff caught prison time for his assault of the dirty little neckbeard sharing hate and underage nudes. I agree, he shouldn't have, but when you permanently blind a guy and shatter his teeth with a beating, you're not going to get let off with a warning. However, I feel like after what Nicholas was caught doing, it's good that we have harsher rules for people in charge of the data who abuse it. Someone has to watch the watchman. Nicholas was, An incel. There's no pleasant way to say it. It's not political, it's just a fact. He wasn't bad looking, really. Tall, gangly, and very intelligent. Nicholas's problem stemmed from not understanding social norms. For example, sharing with your coworker that you really like feet when they're wearing sandals, or that a woman who turns you down because she has a boyfriend is a Stacy and a thought. He would routinely make hurtful memes and put them in the break room, a little friend group back home calling him based, and egging him on to try bolder tactics, like being a true alpha. All of this is pretty cringe, I know. In the intervening 10 years, it seems not much has changed. Nobody likes talking about these guys, let alone hearing about it, but given what happened, it warrants discussion. After all, I'm here to tell you about what you don't see, right? Nicholas is fielding reports and stumbles across a girl's leaked nudes. He immediately boasted. He didn't care that she might be underage, that these are private photos. He downloads them without any care, and it only takes our IT guys a half an hour or less to notify our boss. He's caught and reprimanded with suspension pending investigation, but he already knows he's going to be fired and potentially prosecuted. Yet, they fail to overlook one important fact. Nicholas had the rest of her private information when he got the flag, and he saved it. Nicholas was spotted driving across state lines in his dad's car. His last known movements show him turning into an alley and not emerging from the other side. His account was being monitored, and posts that would fit his behavior were kept a close eye on. Sure enough, 3 posts of note would pop up. 2 from his personal account, and 1 from an anonymous board fielding information only he would have. 2 personal posts were a photo of him holding a girl and positively beaming, kissing her on the forehead. There were tears in her eyes. The caption,
"Finally met my goddess. Tonight is going to be amazing. Then we're gonna have a grand finale."
His few friends and family responding begged him to get in touch with them, that he needed to speak to the authorities, but Nicholas ignored them, as he did with every phone call from his parents and psychologist. Then, 2 hours later, a post was made to an anonymous board with several photos that, when sent to us, made my blood run cold, and Nicholas's manager quit before taking her life some months later with a written apology to the girl's family.
Hey bros, I did it. I got the girl of my dreams. She's a real cute e-girl, and I can't believe I was so lucky. It must have been fate that her photos came up on my computer. I believe God wanted me to have her. Like in the olden days. Take the woman you want and make her your wife. Even if that's by force. You can't stop destiny, right? I never would have gotten this far without you guys. Without this place. You all showed me how to be a real man. To step out of my own beta male shadow and take what's rightfully mine. We had a magical night. But she's growing cold towards me. It's time to speed things up. I'll see you in the afterlife, bros. I hope you get your girls too. I'll be welcomed with open arms. F. Nicholas.
He'd only added 1 photo to go with the post. A photo of the dashboard of his car speeding down a road and towards a cliff edge. When they eventually found the wreckage, both of them were found inside, jarred to bits. Nicholas had his arms wrapped around the poor girl, even in death. Report 5. New face, old face. I have a couple of weird ones I want to share with you. After our last reports of animal and child abuse, I wanted to switch things up and share some of the more odd occurrences. Don't worry, it's still stomach-churningly gross and grim. I just don't like delving into detail on those subjects. And you know how it is. Nobody has fun reading them. It was in the fall of 2021. It'd been a solid 3 months since I'd had a major incident. Just the usual inappropriate pictures, racist commentary, and occasional violent video or execution. I realize that sounds horrific, and it is, but I wouldn't be here if every little thing affected me. Contrary to what some people think, we are made of sterner stuff here. We wouldn't make it otherwise. An account began getting flooded for spam report, and multiple users were reporting that they couldn't even use the site because they were getting post notifications and comments from the same account. New face, old face. It was astronomical how much they were interacting with these people. Thousands of comments simply saying, "I like your face," over and over. A bot script running at peak efficiency was my guess. Checking their profile, I immediately felt unsettled. Their profile picture was them with a papier-mâché mask, and their eyes drawn in a Picasso style, and the skin crinkled in the corners, cracked in other places. Their bio just had that unsettling vibe. New face, old face, art, dancing, windows, always searching for more. Sure, without the visual aid, that just seems like some child's attempt at being spooky, but having those uneven eyes staring at you while you scan their profile was a different kind of creepy. I scrolled down and noticed that they had a normal amount of friends, none of which had profile pictures, a series of posts just stating more of the same from their bio and a single video. The video was something straight out of a nightmare fuel gallery. It was late in the office, and my only other 2 colleagues were across the hall. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up as I hit play. The camera was positioned in a long hallway, the only light coming from behind, an eerie blue hue just barely illuminating the surroundings and ensuring the remainder of the front was enshrouded in darkness.
New face.
Something called out, echoing along the walls, high-pitched and scratchy.
Old face.
More gravelly, getting closer. It chanted the name in this strange fashion as something stirred in the darkness, taking tentative steps with each iteration of the calling. They were wearing an all-black morph suit, walking backwards on their hands and knees. They must have been a contortionist because their joints should have snapped under the pressure. On their torso lay something white and pink. Their head was tucked in until they were in perfect line of sight with the camera. They pushed their chest up, and I swear I heard a cracking sound, the small shape that sat there flying into the air and being caught by their left hand. Their head snapped up, and those unsettling, Picasso-drawn eyes met the camera lens. They held the item up to the screen, and I felt that sense of being sized up by something far more powerful than I am. The bile rose in my throat as it came into view. A perfectly reconstructed face, lips somehow looking plump, a bit of color in the cheeks, a scar across the chin, a mole over the eyebrow and flopping around in his hand. It looked too real. And then he began pulling up the bottom of the mask. A bright red chin and broken teeth came into view for just a second as the video ended with 2 more words that chilled me.
My face.
I immediately banned the account for spam and sent responses to the people who'd complained. All of them responded with a thank you, save one. Their profile picture had been taken off, and all the information on them had been removed, as if the account was deactivated. I made a note of it and signed off for the night, happy I'd put in a good night's work. When I got in for my next shift a couple of days later, I was pulled into a side room by my ops manager and someone I didn't recognize. They wore black shades and said very little to begin with. The ops manager asked me if I remembered the situation the other night with the mass spam reports. Yeah, what about it? His lips pursed, and he asked me if I recalled the profile I shut down, what I remembered of it. I paused, casting my mind back to that unsettling page. They had a weird profile, like an art project. Maybe only 20 friends, all of them with no pictures. The other one chimed in, asking if I could check the accounts. His voice was low, authoritative, serious. I felt uneasy. No, why would I? They exchanged a look and put a piece of paper in front of me. A missing persons report with the name of the final account I couldn't get in touch with, a young man. But it wasn't the report that scared me. It was his face. The smile, the lights of his eyes, and the scar on his chin. It took me some time to calm down, and I was assured I'd done nothing wrong. I just stumbled over something that was out of my depth, and the other guy took over. Someone from the FBI looking into the missing persons, and if they were connected, my company naturally worked closely with them. There wasn't much I could offer them. Sadly, just told them what I knew and promised I'd be on the lookout, hoping I'd never see such a sight again. But when it comes to the most awful things this place has, they don't stay hidden for too long. And it would ultimately contribute to why I left the profession, or was forced out. Depends on how you look at it. Maybe I'll tell you all about it soon. One more for the road. Maybe I'll come back and share some more. There's still a few left in the tank, and if people care, I'll keep sharing. But it's not about the destination so much as the journey, right? Let's talk about Report 6, the Safekeepers. We talked before about someone who clearly liked faces far too much, fetishizing it and twisting it into something truly horrific. What about when a normal face, the kind you see every time you go on the internet or social media, is what chills you the most? A couple of statistics for you before we begin. Someone goes missing every 90 seconds. In the time it's taken you to get this far, 6 people or more have vanished into thin air. They are more likely to be under 20 years old and twice as likely to be female. Half of them are intentional runaways, a quarter are eventually found safe and well. The last quarter never turn up. Of the 350,000 that will go missing in a standard year, 5,500 never turn up. If they're not found within a few weeks, they're likely to never turn up again. Now ask yourself, why do we find so few? I say this because there's vast metrics of data available at our fingertips, and they utilize as much up-to-date info as possible to assist us and vice versa in our mission to help raise flags for authorities when someone's account is flagged because they're missing, either by a mutual friend. This is common if the person is suicidal and expresses as such, or if they suspect harm could come to them. But there are places that operate under the radar with far more up-to-date information. Enter We Must Find Them, a professional page set up in 2012 that routinely shares Amber Alerts, uplifting posts, and generally helpful information about missing persons and resources that you can use to share awareness, all that good stuff. Of course, that's not it. First report about the page came with a message from the user. Search up Safekeepers. I asked my colleague Wanda to find what she could while I checked over the initial report. They claimed the page was sending out coded messages embedded within the code of their videos, photos, and occasionally cipher-coded in their Amber Alerts. It attracted so much interest that there was even a group dedicated to solving it that seemed odd. Sure enough, Wanda found a closed group called the Safekeepers, and of the 200 or so, a handful of studious members dominated the posts. A lot of wild theories were being thrown around, very similar to the Wayfair scandal we saw recently, mostly baseless claims from two particular keepers, Stu Bryant and Dom Machado. Hey everybody, I hope y'all are having a great day. So this video is a special one. It's with Spirit Voices, Romnex, Dusklight Radio, and of course me. I did a lot of sound design on this one, so I'm really excited to hear what you all think of it and hope it turned out well. And I wanted to let you all know about what I'm going to be doing to celebrate passing 1,000 videos. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be remaking a few of my favorites, like my older videos. One is going to be Forest of 1,000 Legs, and the other is going to be Because You Are My Baby, with Spirit Voices returning for both of that because she was in the original ones. But also, I had some custom artwork commissioned, which I'm going to be putting on sweaters and things like that as like new merch, essentially. And this is going to be the first time I've released new merch in like 4 years, so I'm pretty excited for that. I'll most likely share mock-ups of it on the community page when it's ready. I was hoping it would be ready by the time this video was done, but unfortunately I haven't been able to get the designs approved yet. But yeah, I'm really excited for that. So, and Dusklight Radio has a new video that just came out probably about an hour ago, if this video goes up when I think it will. So make sure to check that out. I'll put a link to it in the description. Also, I wanted to say I've been updating the podcast a lot more, like Spotify and iTunes, things like that. So if you like to listen to the stories on there, there's going to be more uploads. There's probably I'm trying to do every 3-4 days upload on there. But yeah, if you don't know about the podcast, it's essentially just Dark Somnium. Like if you go to Spotify and type in the Dark Somnium, or iTunes, you type in Dark Somnium, it should come up. But yeah, I hope you all have a great day, and let me know what you're doing for Halloween and for your weekend.
Entry, August 16th, Tuesday, 2016. M. Kellis. I'm writing this from a motel in Redstone, Colorado. I've been in the same room for the past 3 days, and have only left to get snacks and bottled water. There haven't been any warnings on the TV yet, but I'm waiting. Will there even be warnings this time? Back in Glenwood Springs, where I'm from, it started with the warning, the emergency alert system. You know the sound, the sudden silence, then the successive beeps followed by that flatline tone. When I heard the beeping and screeching, I assumed it wasn't anything to worry about, at most a weather advisory. But how do you react when this comes up?
Emergency Alert System. EDD authorities issued an emergency action notification. 1 mile distance from intersection I-70 and Route 82. 3 minutes preparation. Locate closest relations. Grasp hands and sit where you are. Close your eyes and do not speak. Do not speak. Do not open your eyes. Ignore all sounds. Do not react to touch. Failure to follow cautionary measures will result in detection. Warning will be lifted at the sound of 4 short beeps, followed by 1 extended.
I want you to hear this before going into the rest, because if you do hear it, and I hope you never do, then know that all you can do is take care of yourself. You'll want to help your parents or siblings or partners, but you can't. Please let me share this with you, as crazy as it might sound, and it might help you. I lived with my mom in a small ranch house that sat close to the road just outside of town on Highway 6. The sun had just gone down, and the sky still had errant remnants of fading colors. The sliding door leading to the small backyard was open, and there was barely a breeze coming through. It had been a beautiful night, disturbed only by heavy and sporadic traffic. I didn't pay a lot of attention to it at the time, but it sounded like semis were making their way into town, then back out again. Mom was in the kitchen, waiting for water to boil for tea as she went through her cell phone, which was charging in a nearby outlet. Lynn, my best friend, had stepped into the bathroom, and I was relaxed on the couch, watching something. It happened right then. A sound from the distance so potent and full of force, it started as a rumble in my chest before I even heard it. The vibrations rolled through me, and before I could react, I heard a sound blasting in the distance. It was like a sub-audible rumble, followed by a muffled explosion, ending in what sounded like the last bits of water going down a recently unclogged drain. I froze and looked back at my mom.
I heard it too.
She was wide-eyed. The steam was just beginning to shoot from the kettle's spout. I heard the bathroom door shut, and Lynn came back, stopping at the couch. Her hand was resting on her chest.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, and felt it. I looked at the open sliding door. What do you think? My phone went off. My mom's phone went off. The kettle reached its piercing shriek, and she removed it from the stove. The TV went blank and began to buzz loudly. We read the message. I looked to my friend, my mom. I saw their mouths forming the words, "Grasp hands. Do not speak." The wind picked up, and night air spilled into the house. The smell was intermingled with ozone and decay. My mom went to the door and closed it. The lights went out. I saw dark shapes charging past the house out of town, with strange blue-green lights emanating from their eyes. Lynn screamed, but covered her mouth instantly. My stomach dropped 3 inches into my hips. Despite all of this, it was eerily silent outside. Aside from the wind pounding against the house, there were no screams, no frantic tires peeling down driveways. When Lynn grabbed my hand, I almost jumped. My mom sat next to me, and all 3 of us eased onto the couch in the dark. Lynn whispered into the inky black.
Is this for real? It's like some bizarre test or practical joke.
I felt their hands in mine, and knew that, on some level, we realized it wasn't a joke. The wind continued, but through it, I heard something else. It was the sound of a crowd talking, but it sounded like they were all speaking in whispers. I had this feeling of being far from them, but that I was drawing closer every second, because the cacophony of voices became larger, but no more intelligible. I think we should do like the warning said, at least until we hear the all clear, I said to both of them. They both agreed in small voices, and I could only assume they were closing their eyes like I had done. I have no idea how long we sat there. The sound of voices grew but dissipated slightly, as if scattered by the gusts outside. I heard no human voices outside, no boots pounding on the road or the sound of engines. Then a few things happened almost at once. I felt a few puffs of cold air come from the left, then the right, moving across my face and tossing my hair. Whispers were carried on them, but I only caught snippets.
Where is she?
That nasty fucker. He's next. He's next.
Some crying and sniffling. It sounded like it was coming from a child.
Time, more time.
My mom's hand clenched in mine. It was dry, but the way in which she held it felt different. The fingers moved one by one in succession, the thumb rubbing the top of my hand. It felt so familiar, and though I can admit now that I realized right then why I remembered that touch, I couldn't in the moment. I heard the sharp intake of breath, followed by a slow, rattling exhale. It made my blood run with ice. It sounded final. Mom's voice came out dry, papery, and tired.
I've missed you, but you've got to get out of here, Bub. They're frenzied and craving life again. It's a thirst you can't imagine.
This was said urgently, sadly.
Please, sweetie, get in the car and go.
My mind was racing, and Lynn's hand was beyond sweaty. She had heard it too. I knew the voice, and I knew I trusted it. But the warning? As I was trying to think of where my car keys were, Lynn's hand clenched in mine, painfully hard. She convulsed on the couch and cried out. I couldn't help myself, and I looked over at her. When I opened my eyes, I found her face 4 inches from mine with her eyes closed, breathing heavily through her nose. Lynn, I asked in a whisper.
You nasty bitch. It should have been you.
Lynn's voice was hard and cruel. She wrenched my arm towards her, and my finger slipped from my mom's hand. I won't detail the grappling fight we had, partially because the events of that night were so sudden and confusing I hardly remember specifics. I left her writhing on the floor, yelling incoherently, and ran to the kitchen, grabbing the keys off the key rack, and I felt my way to the garage door in the darkness. The scratches she gave me hurt, but the tears had fallen from my eyes, so the already dark and confusing world I saw was at least clear, not blurry. I had no idea what the hell was happening and knew that I was in danger merely by moving, breathing heavily and loudly, and for having my eyes open. Mom's car rolled onto the street, and I went south down 6. The town was dark. The shops were all deserted, but maybe people were just sitting and holding hands, eyes closed, waiting. I saw a few people walking slowly in the streets. A few were running, taking clunky, uncoordinated steps. They looked confused, and some looked angry. As I approached the edges of town, I saw a blockade with a small opening in the middle of the road. Men and women in black uniforms and glowing blue-green eyes watched me as I approached. They began to converge on the gap, with strange, brass-looking tools in their hands. I began crying as I sped up and surged through them. A few screamed as I almost clipped them with my car. They watched me leave with their strange eyes. What good is a blockade if they let people through? Did I do something, or not do something, that put them at ease as I drove? Were there others, and where did they go? Why were their eyes glowing? I couldn't shake that they felt like military. But most important of all, what the hell had I experienced? The speed with which these events took place left me dizzy, and it took some time for my mind to settle. So I've been sitting in this motel room now, wondering all of this, and I think I'm starting to put it together. The first piece that came to me was the acceptance that the voice I heard and the touch I felt were my father's. I didn't want to believe that, because he's been dead for 6 years now. A sudden stroke took him as he worked in the garage one morning. He's the only one who called me Bub. I'm going to stop here because it's as far as I've gotten. I want to return, but I don't know what I'll find, or even if I'll be allowed back. There's been nothing broadcasted on the news. I appreciate your comments or thoughts. Update. I've been contacted by an EDD official named Eldridge. He wants to speak with me about the events of that night. I meet with him tomorrow. Hopefully I'll get some answers to all this. Stay posted. I appreciate all of your responses. I was told by Eldridge that my mom didn't make it through the event. He said the town is lost. He didn't elaborate. I want to believe she's alive, that Lynn's alive too. But after what he told me, I don't know what to think. But if I'm being honest with you, I think I know the truth of it. I'm reeling from this news in the worst way. But this forum and writing everything down seems to calm my mind enough for me to have some feelings of normalcy, so here I am. I appreciate all your thoughts and kind words. One user asked why I just left my mom there, taking the only car we had. I would like to say I knew right then that she was gone, but that would be a lie. I was scared. Scared of the rattling breath she took, the words my father spoke, the sudden change in Lynn. It was all too much, so I ran. I'm not proud of that, but there it is. Entry. August 18th, Thursday, 2016. M. Callis. I did as some suggested and met Eldridge in a public place. He was almost aggressively ordinary in appearance, somewhere between 35 and 45. His eyes and his demeanor conveyed a kind but sterile personality. Below is what he told me. He gave me clearance to write this down and pass it on. He said he wants to get this out into the open, even if it is in the smallest of ways, on one random subreddit out of 1,000.
Higher-ups aren't reacting how they should be to this, so maybe this will subvert their orders to remain tight-lipped.
His words. We met at a local coffee shop. Amidst the normal sounds and the conversation, we took a seat in the back. I stirred my black coffee as he talked. The EDD referred to in the emergency message is called the Extraliminal Defense Department. It was started in the late 1930s, when rumors of Nazi experiments into the paranormal began circulating. Although it was said to have stopped in the early 40s after the Philadelphia experiment. Google it. I had to. Operations continued. He was brief with me on details, and he glazed over a lot. But the turning point for the EDD was when a breakthrough was made in relation to the afterlife, or, more accurately, a liminal phase, as they call it. Don't ask, because I don't know how, and he didn't say. But they determined that to some extent, humans can exist beyond death. It's not life after death. He was adamant about that. They found that there is a plane of existence, or a way of being after death. It has something to do with emotions. Eldridge explained it like this. Individuals create patterns in their brains throughout life relating to events, situations, or circumstances, and these are linked, inextricably, to emotions. These create what you can think of as ruts in the road or a well-worn path related to a thought pattern. People carve these ruts deep as time passes. In many cases, the patterns are negative in nature, though in some cases they're positive. In general, though, it's negative thinking patterns. Individuals that pass on with deep ruts associated with one emotion, or a few, often feel these emotions more strongly than others. These emotions are somehow the catalyst for perpetuation beyond the physical existence. There's a desire to keep those ruts deep and fresh. I thought of old ghost stories, where people die angry or in deep sorrow, and their spirits linger forever. I told him this, and he said it's very much along those lines, although much more complex and less Stephen King.
It's an inability to let go in some ways. We can't explain it too in depth, but the science that's been worked out is beyond me, and definitely beyond you.
He explained, with no condescension in his voice. Cut to 1995. Facilities have been built across the United States, 5 of them. Colorado, South Texas, West Virginia, Maine, and Arizona. These facilities contain the culmination of the R&D done for the EDD, both privately and government-funded. Each facility has its own liminal gateway equipment, designed to generate a space to bring these manifestations, read ghost, into being. They're called shadows to those in the know, apparently. The catch is that enormous amounts of energy need to be fed into the shadows to make them corporeal. This tends to result in a gross amplification of the shadow's personality and their emotional state. All 5 facilities operate simultaneously or not at all. Despite their geographic distance, they share some sort of ley lines that power the devices with enough energy to complete the shadow infusion process, read bringing a ghost into physical existence. All are set to operate by specific key players in the EDD. The problem is that if less than 5 are used at once, more power is fed into the active devices by default of the ley lines, which can have potentially devastating consequences. Colorado's site was the only one running the night of August 16th.
The fucked up thing? Pardon me.
No, you're right. It's all fucked. He smiled.
Yes, well, the problem we didn't foresee was the ability of a shadow to escape the liminal containment field.
I was lost with this comment, but he muttered something about the infusion plates operating at unregulated rates, and a crack in the containment lid. In 2013, he explained, a manifestation escaped and entered into a research scientist's body. The woman in question immediately became violent, her behavior erratic. She injured a few others on the floor before being subdued, and the machine's sequence shut down across the country. Her original personality never returned, and for the past 3 years she's been held in a secure EDD facility. The behavior ebbs and flows, but she won't answer to her name anymore, and has accurately provided details into a life she should know nothing about. This has since been dubbed supplantation or subplanting. It's as scary as it sounds, not necessarily a body snatcher, but a body switcher, with the caveat that the person whose body it is has nowhere to go after being supplanted, so they push you out of your body and take over. EDD scientists don't know where you go, or what happens to you after being supplanted. So far, there have been 11 supplantation incidents across EDD facilities. And these people are not themselves anymore? I thought of the words spoken to me that night. You've got to get out of here, Bub. That wasn't my mother. Not anymore, at least. Did that mean... Eldridge tore at the cardboard of his now empty coffee cup.
No, not anymore. The ones who are still alive, that is to say, are not who they used to be. 3 out of those 11 killed themselves.
Why? It was all I could ask.
We suspect that the intruding manifestation couldn't cope with its new body, its new state of existence, but we don't really know for sure.
He glanced at his watch, then out the window into the sunlight.
I have to leave soon. I wanted to meet for 2 reasons. The first, I already covered. I wanted the history of this, or at least some semblance of it, out there. What the government and the EDD are struggling with needs at least some light shed on it. We're playing with dangerous, volatile, and at best, poorly understood forces. Forgive the hypocrisy of my current official station, but that doesn't sit well with me morally. The second, and more official reason I'm here is because I need to know your experience. We found your mother in your house, and the remains of what appeared to be a fight.
I sat back in my chair and took a deep breath. The events of that night had played over in my head 1,000,000 times, and I knew he'd read my posting on it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be meeting. Still, I explained it to him. He listened silently, taking notes. He looked up when I explained about my father.
What was your father's last name?
Charleston, but everyone called him Charlie. Never Charles. He hated that. I thought again of the touch of my mother's hand as my father spoke through her. Eldridge was silent for a moment. He clicked his pen and shut the notebook.
Thank you, Miss Callis. I have to head back to town.
Glenwood? Does that mean...
No, it doesn't.
I asked quickly. Were there others? Others who got out? He turned to leave, his back to me. He shook his head, no. Wait! I got up and followed him. It feels like you told me a lot, but barely anything of worth.
That information is worth more than my life in some ways. Believe me.
Yes, well... Tears welled in my eyes. My mother's gone, according to you. And that's probably true if I can trust what I feel in my heart. But my father seemed to speak to me, which seems impossible since he died 6 years ago. And my home is apparently off limits, yet no one outside of Glenwood seems to have any idea what happened. My voice had risen, and a couple close to us looked over uncomfortably. Eldridge glanced around hastily and led me outside.
The night of August 16th, at approximately 1900 hours, the device outside of your town was engaged. The other 4 were dormant. We're determining how this happened, but it's somewhat hard given that the facility is largely destroyed. The conductors aren't meant to handle that much energy. With no containment field...
Containment field?
I must be crazy showing you this.
He grabbed a napkin and drew this.
This is more or less a piece of what the device looks like. Those 5 structures...
He pointed to them.
...are melted beyond recognition. We don't know how it was turned on, but this now puts the other 4 at risk.
So, this device is activated. It goes nuclear, essentially, opens a door for the manifestation...
Manifestations. Plural.
Manifestations to come through, and then...
And then the door was shut. The EDD currently has operatives containing what they can, but we are looking at what I think can be, ironically, called a ghost town now. I say again, the town is lost.
His keys jingled and he shifted.
I have to go.
He handed me a business card.
If you remember anything else, contact me. Do not attempt to go back. Do you understand me?
I numbly took the card and nodded. He patted my arm awkwardly and left. And now I'm back in my small room. This is what I remember from the conversation. Do with it what you will. I want to mourn my mother, but there's a bizarre sense of hope with the knowledge that my father is somehow still around. It's masking those sorrowful feelings, for now at least. I'm going to go back. I can walk and camp my way there. I have to begin tonight. The last 4 days have culminated in nothing but empty takeout containers and confusion. There has to be something I can do. Some way I can see my parents again. I will keep you all updated as best I can in the next few days. Thank you for your support and thoughts. Entry, August 20th, Saturday, 2016. M. Callis. The grief was nearer than I thought. I posted the last update and everything swept over me. It's hard to convey. But the sheer terror of knowing that this has happened, paired with the apparent death of my mother, overwhelmed me. The thought of going back to Glenwood was exciting, but that feeling disappeared quickly. I wanted to get out of Redstone. I needed to fill the space in my head with something other than worry and grief. I roughly, very roughly, pushed this down and covered it until it was a dull throb in the background of my mind. By Friday, I was in motion. I thankfully had my mom's credit cards as she had left her purse in the car, so I bought a single tent, backpack, change of clothes, a battery source for my laptop, and some other supplies. I finished prepping around 3 p.m. At 3:10, the power went out in Redstone. I checked outside my motel room door and saw quizzical faces appearing in the windows. Small clusters of people gathered outside. There was a sense of general confusion and annoyance. Returning to my room, I took a shower quickly to savor what I could of the hot water, and eventually left town on foot around 4 p.m. The power outage was bizarre and ominous, and I half expected to have my phone go off with that terrible emergency message, but nothing happened. The answer would be in Glenwood. It took me about 10.5 hours to get there, with some small breaks in between. Along the way, I saw roadblocks with heavy traffic being directed through detours. The EDD must have set up some sort of quarantine in order to keep others out and Glenwood residents in. I kept my distance and continued along. Foot traffic through the wilderness didn't seem to be a top concern for them. I admit that when I finally got there, what I found in the late hours of the night chilled me. As I approached, I felt a hum in my chest, similar to the one I felt on August 16th. It wasn't followed by any explosion, but it grew as I got closer to town. Once I was close enough, I saw why. Spaced in intervals of about 120 feet apart were semi-sized truck flatbeds. On each one rested a tower, four-sided and slightly triangular in shape, 40 feet high, topped with a globe that was ringed with a flat band around its circumference. Dozens of these flatbeds ringed the town. They went as far as I could see, shrinking in the distance until I could cover them with my thumb. Countless cords as thick as my thigh ran from each. Suddenly, the power outage made sense. This much energy had to come from somewhere. Did the EDD release some false statement blaming a mechanical failure at the power plant? The humming was emanating from them, and a fine haze, not unlike heat rising from a hot road, hung in the space between each tower. I couldn't help but gasp, "It's a goddamn containment field." The implications of this were frightening. In the distance, I could hear yelling, laughter, crying. It all sounded off. The laughter slightly too hysterical, the yelling persistently furious and full of red anger, the crying of a mourner at the edge of a freshly dug grave. It was overwhelming. I suddenly didn't want to try to get in. The events of the past few days were so fresh, the pain so new. I wasn't sure I had the strength. So I sat down and unpacked to busy my hands. With my tent set up, I went inside and zipped the flap shut. The humming in my chest remained. I set an alarm on my watch and dozed for a while. I slept fitfully, and when the alarm went off at 3 a.m., I was happy to be awake. Eating a granola bar, I contemplated turning around, but what was there to go back to? Grabbing my backpack, I zipped my tent shut behind me and took off. I could see personnel carrying those strange devices in the distance, blue-green eyes alight. As I walked, I thought over what Eldridge told me. My eyes had been closed when both my mom and Lynn were supplanted. The shadows felt like gusts of cold air, and I could still hear them. But could I have seen them? Maybe the strange eyes were some sort of defense against supplantation. Ocular implants, though? Were these people keeping watch even human? These questions whirled like a dry wind in my mind, and before I knew it, I was within town limits. It was dark, so I wasn't terribly worried about being seen, but I crouched anyway. I made my way up to the west side of the Roaring Fork River, and I would have to cross before it connected to the Colorado. The sentries, I guess I can call them that now, were weaving in and out of the tower-generated haze, untouched as they patrolled. I reasoned that I should be all right, too. There wasn't much activity, but the horrible noises continued, growing louder as I approached. I would have to go through some residential and shopping areas to get to the heart of the town, and the thought scared me. I didn't have a weapon, and I didn't even know what kind I would need. Obviously, you're reading this, so I'm currently safe for the most part. But at the time, my mind was moving from one awful scenario to the next. I never mentioned details of my fight with Lynn, and I don't intend to, with the exception that she fought with a strength I didn't know she had. I was terrified to encounter that, not only for the potential of an altercation, but it would also alert people to my presence. Moving softly, I crept around the edge of a flatbed. I looked up, and the enormity of the device struck me. It was tall and alien. I skirted around the right side of it and saw the retreating back of a guard moving away to my left. I took off running and stopped under the awning of a small hardware shop. Passing through the haze and hum, I realized that I felt nothing. No resistance or pushback. Even stranger was the fact that once I passed through, the humming in my chest stopped. I kept close to the wall and rounded the corner. I was going to have to cross the Colorado and head way west to get to my house. It would take a while, but the shadows would help. The sounds continued in the background,